Chapter 1718. Settling the Score. Ning Yu could see it clearly. When he finished speaking, Zhang Kejuan and Di Tianming's expressions clearly changed. Zhang Kejuan and Di Tianming were both at the demon spirit realm, and they were also very strong. Someone who could make their expressions change was definitely not ordinary. First of all, that person had to be at least a sage. Secondly, that person's status in Divine Emperor Palace should be terrifyingly high. Russell. Not long after, a middle-aged man appeared in Ning Yu's vision. The middle-aged man's gaze fell on the human demon as soon as he entered the first skybox. He completely ignored Ning Yu. The middle-aged man had been watching the entire battle between the human demon and Di Tianming from the void. Through observation, the middle-aged man gave the human demon a rough estimate. His cultivation was around the peak of early-stage sage. His exact strength wasn't clear, but he was at least at the peak of early-stage sage, possibly even at mid-stage sage. After all, Di Tianming's true battle prowess was at the peak of early-stage sage, and Di Tianming was at a disadvantage against the human demon. Therefore, the human demon's strength was infinitely close to mid-stage sage. I heard that you want to stay in the first skybox and want to chase away my most distinguished guest. The middle-aged man retracted his thoughts and said to the human demon, I'll give you two choices. 1. Get out of here as soon as possible. 2. Apologize to Di Tianming and young Master Zhang. Zhang Kejuan immediately. Before the human demon could speak, Ning Yu crossed his arms and looked at the middle-aged man with interest. I think the third choice is more suitable for us. Ning Yu's sudden interjection made the middle-aged man's face turn a little dark. The middle-aged man was a wily old fox, so he naturally noticed the relationship between Ning Yu and the human demon. If he had to choose between Ning Yu and the human demon, the middle-aged man would definitely choose the human demon. There was no other reason. One was an early-stage Sky Supreme, while the other was close to mid-stage sage. If it was anyone else, they would have chosen the human devil. His words are my words, the human demon said indifferently. At this time the human demon said, from now on, every word he says represents my meaning. The meaning of the human demon's words was clear. Being disrespectful to Ning Yu is being disrespectful to me. The middle-aged man's expression turned ugly. The middle-aged man had chosen to appear at this time to suppress the human demon with Di Tianming. It would be best if the human demon could reveal the purpose of their visit. But from the looks of it now, it might be a little tricky. Let's attack together and probe him. Just as the middle-aged man was feeling a little troubled, Di Tianming's words suddenly rang out in his mind. Hearing this, the middle-aged man immediately became enlightened. Both he and Di Tianming were at the peak of the early-stage sage realm. If the two of them joined hands to probe the human demon, they should be able to find out the truth about the human demon. However, the middle-aged man was still a little uncertain. Before he made his move, he asked Di Tianming to contact all the demon spirit state sages in Emperor City. In order to reach a deep cooperation agreement with the Emperor Divine Palace, Di Tianming had brought the war immortals from the other big families in the demon spirit realm to express his sincerity. Only in the devil spirit realm could a sage obtain the title of sage. For example, the war god of the clan and Qianhao. Each of the 9 big families in the devil spirit realm had more than one war god. How arrogant! After secretly thinking of a countermeasure, the middle-aged man and Di Tianming shouted at the same time and quickly rushed toward the human demon. The 2 martial artists at the peak of the early stage of the sage realm joined hands to attack the human demon. For a moment, Zhang Kejuan was a little dumbfounded. To be honest, Zhang Kejuan did not expect this result. In Zhang Kejuan's opinion, it was really unwise for the middle-aged man to make an enemy of the human demon at this time, as the absolute senior of the Emperor Divine Palace. In any case, the human demon was a martial artist of the sage realm, so he must have a huge force behind him. Making an enemy out of the human demon at this time was definitely bad news for the cooperation between the Devil's spirit realm and the Emperor Divine Palace. As the youngest genius of the Zhang clan in the Devil's spirit realm, Zhang Kejuan had already been secretly selected as the next war god. As long as he could successfully cooperate with the Emperor Divine Palace, Zhang Kejuan would be able to get the best resources of the Zhang clan and successfully reach the Sage Realm. Therefore, Zhang Kejuan did not want to offend the human demon and the force behind Ningyu. However, in Zhang Kejuan's heart, he hoped that Di Tianming and the middle-aged man could defeat the human demon, or even capture the human demon alive. In that case, he could attack Ningyu unscrupulously and let Ningyu have a taste of his true strength. Zhang Kejuan had a kind of almost blind confidence in himself. He believed that the reason Ningyu could withstand the pressure of his aura was largely because of the magic treasures he had on him. It had little to do with his own strength. Zhang Kejuan really wanted to spar with Ningyu and defeat the arrogant guy, Ningyu, fair and square. Rumble. Di Tianming and the middle-aged man used their full strength right from the start. Di Tianming and the middle-aged man did not dare to be careless when dealing with a martial artist who was suspected to be at the mid-stage of the Sage Realm. Even though they used their full strength, the two of them still secretly warned the sages, and even the half-sages around them. Once the human demon displayed his terrifying strength, the sages and half-sages hiding in the surroundings would attack unconditionally. The human demon had long sensed that there were sages and half-sages hiding in the surroundings, so he had been hiding his cultivation of the mid-stage of the Sage Realm and deliberately revealed his cultivation of the peak of the early stage of the Sage Realm. On one hand, the human demon did not want to reveal his strength so early. On the other hand, the human demon wanted to capture all the sages in one fell swoop. However, the second idea only lingered in the human demon's mind for a second before it was thrown to the back of his mind. Even though the human demon had the battle strength of the peak of the mid-stage of the Sage Realm, it would still be very difficult to capture all the sages in one fell swoop. If there was a fish that escaped the net and they contacted the Emperor Divine Palace and the experts of the demon spirit realm, it would be self-defeating. Therefore, the human demon decided to deal with Di Tianming and the middle-aged man first, and let Ningyu and Zhang Kejuan exchange blows. If Ningyu could find a way to control Zhang Kejuan, it would be very helpful for their next operation. Fight outside. With this thought in mind, the human demon shouted in a low voice. Immediately, his figure flashed, and he rushed out of the number 1 skybox. Behind the human demon, Di Tianming and the middle-aged man looked at each other. Then their figures flashed, and they disappeared behind the human demon. As for the sages and half-sages hiding in the void, they did not hesitate and followed Di Tianming and the middle-aged man with all their might. From the moment the human demon and Di Tianming fought to the moment they left, only a few minutes had passed. Zhang Kejuan did not know how to react for a moment and was a little stunned. Ha ha ha. But soon, Zhang Kejuan laughed loudly, and the corners of his mouth curled up. He stared at Ningyu and said sinisterly, Chapter 1719. Chapter 1719. Chapter 1719. To be evenly matched, Zhang Kejuan was confident that he could defeat Ningyu. Therefore, after the human demon and Di Tianming left, Zhang Kejuan bared his fangs. Although killing Ningyu might be a little unrealistic, Zhang Kejuan was still very confident that he could defeat Ningyu and make Ningyu kneel down and kowtow a few times. In your opinion, how should we settle this debt? In response to Zhang Kejuan's arrogant words, Ningyu did not take any drastic actions. Ningyu's indifferent performance was a little unexpected for Zhang Kejuan. From Zhang Kejuan's point of view, Ningyu was a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. As long as there were no guards by his side, he could easily defeat Ningyu. But now, Zhang Kejuan's heart wavered a little. Since Ningyu had such strong confidence, it meant that he had some ability. Kneel down and kowtow to me a few times, then release your mind and let me control you completely. Zhang Kejuan looked at Ningyu and said coldly, "Only then will I consider letting you live." "Not a bad idea, I agree." Ningyu muttered to himself for a moment before nodding his head. "You agreed just like that?" Zhang Kejuan couldn't believe his ears. Kneeling down and kowtowing to someone else was something that anyone would consider very carefully. Moreover, not only did Ningyu have to kowtow to him, but he also had to open up his mind and let him control it. Under this premise, Ningyu could still agree without hesitation, which indeed made Zhang Kejuan look at him in a new light. "What else can I do? You've already made such a huge sacrifice, so I'll definitely fulfill your wish." Spreading his hands out, Ningyu helplessly replied, "Truth be told, I don't want to spend so much effort to control a pinnacle heavenly sovereign, since I feel that a pinnacle heavenly sovereign isn't useful to me." The first half of Ningyu's sentence was fine, and Zhang Kejuan was very satisfied. He was just short of praising Ningyu for being sensible. However, the second half of Ningyu's words made Zhang Kejuan so angry that his nose became crooked. In the end, Ningyu had misinterpreted his intentions. He actually thought that he was going to kneel down and kowtow to him, and that he was going to open his mind and let him control it. This was intolerable. Zhang Kejuan was instantly enraged. Without saying a word, he immediately moved and charged at Ningyu at an extremely terrifying speed. At this moment, Zhang Kejuan's thoughts were very simple. He wanted to injure Ningyu and let Ningyu know how powerful he was. In the face of Zhang Kejuan, who was constantly rushing towards him, Ningyu's expression became extremely solemn. Although Ningyu believed that his strength was comparable to a pinnacle heavenly sovereign, and that he could even kill a pinnacle heavenly sovereign, Zhang Kejuan was no ordinary pinnacle heavenly sovereign. A pinnacle heavenly sovereign in his 20s should have combat strength infinitely close to that of a half-saint. In other words, Zhang Kejuan's true combat strength couldn't be estimated using pinnacle heavenly sovereigns. Yin-yang palm. With a low roar, Ningyu clenched his right hand into a fist and punched out. The yin-yang palm was the 10th palm of the netherworld samsara palm. Moreover, when Ningyu used the yin-yang palm at the Earth Supreme Realm, its power was incomparable to when he used the yin-yang palm at the Sky Supreme Realm. The difference was at least dozens of times greater. Ningyu's intentions were very clear with his first move. He wanted to test Zhang Kejuan's true combat strength. Child's play. Zhang Kejuan immediately revealed a disdainful expression when he saw that Ningyu actually wanted to exchange blows with him. The reason why Zhang Kejuan had such an expression was because he had used 100% of his strength in his first punch. As a quasi-war god of the Zhang family, one of the 9 great families of the demonic spirit realm, Zhang Kejuan was very clear about not holding back against an enemy. Since he wanted to defeat Ningyu, he should beat Ningyu to the ground right from the start. He couldn't give Ningyu any chance to counterattack. "What I want is for you to underestimate me." Ningyu saw Zhang Kejuan's facial expression. With a thought, Ningyu secretly attached the demonic lotus flame to his fist. Even Zhang Kejuan had used 100% of his strength, so Ningyu naturally wouldn't hold back. Not only would he not hold back, but Ningyu would also use his full strength. Ningyu didn't even think about using flames like the myriad beast flame and the myriad bone flame, which were ranked around the 30s of the mystic flames ranking. To deal with Zhang Kejuan, he must use the demonic lotus flame. In the first exchange, Zhang Kejuan and Ningyu both wanted to have the absolute upper hand and defeat the other with one move. Therefore, in the first exchange, Ningyu and Zhang Kejuan used their full strength. Swoosh! Swoosh! 2 figures dashed quickly in the number 1 skybox. Swoosh! Swoosh! Their fists rubbed against the air, emitting a sizzling sound. Bang! In an instant, Ningyu and Zhang Kejuan's fists collided. When the 2 fists collided, an extremely clear sound rang out. Then the two figures quickly retreating to the edge of the room before stopping. It was obvious. In the first exchange of blows, Ningyu and Zhang Kejuan were evenly matched. They were equally matched. He's actually so powerful. Zhang Kejuan was surprised that his first move couldn't do anything to Ningyu. One should know that in order to have the absolute upper hand in the first exchange, Zhang Kejuan had used 100% of his strength. If he couldn't defeat Ningyu with 100% of his strength, he would at least have to use his trump card to defeat Ningyu. In fact, in Zhang Kejuan's heart, he was very reluctant to use his trump card. This time, Zhang Kejuan had a very important task on his shoulders when he went to the Emperor Palace. After all, if he wanted to gain the upper hand in the negotiation with the Emperor Palace, he had to give the Emperor Palace a surprise. Zhang Kejuan's idea for this surprise was relatively simple. He wanted to challenge the current palace master of the Emperor Palace and give the Emperor Palace a show of strength. Zhang Kejuan knew very well that the palace master of the Emperor Palace was only 20 years older than him. If he challenged the palace master of the Emperor Palace and defeated him, he could, to a great extent, reduce the spirit of the Emperor Palace. Although that was the case, Zhang Kejuan felt that he had been insulted by Ningyu, so he immediately decided to use some of his trump cards to teach Ningyu a lesson. Today you have wings. Uft. After thinking through everything, Zhang Kejuan clenched his fists and stared fiercely at Ningyu. However, before Zhang Kejuan could finish his words, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and his face became extremely pale. Demonic lotus flame. When he was exchanging blows with Zhang Kejuan just now, Ningyu quietly inserted the demonic lotus flame into Zhang Kejuan's fist and let it lie dormant in Zhang Kejuan's fist. At the critical moment, when Zhang Kejuan decided to counterattack, Ningyu began to use the demonic lotus flame in Zhang Kejuan's fist. The demonic lotus flame was ranked in the top 5 on the mysterious flame list, and its power was extremely terrifying. Under its attack, Zhang Kejuan spat out a mouthful of blood. His face turned bloodless and extremely pale. Get out! However, Zhang Kejuan was a peak heaven's supreme martial artist and a peerless genius of the Zhang family in the demonic spirit realm. He quickly reacted. Chapter 1720. Absolute Crushing. From the moment he decided to go against Zhang Kejuan, Ningyu had prepared for 2 scenarios. The first preparation was to use the process of punching with Zhang Kejuan to inject the demonic lotus flame into Zhang Kejuan's fist, and then mobilize the demonic lotus flame to further nibble away at Zhang Kejuan's arm. His second preparation was to continue attacking and beat the enemy while they were down. Black Dragon Sword. Ningyu was a practical person. He was prepared to do both. With a flick of his wrist, Ningyu took out the Black Dragon Sword and waved it repeatedly, displaying the 10th move of the Emperor God technique, cutting the heavens. Among all of Ningyu's techniques, the strongest was none other than Heaven Slashing. Although the yin-yang palm was powerful, it was built on the premise that it was perfectly compatible with the demonic lotus flame. Severing the heavens was different. As long as he activated the Black Dragon Sword, he would be able to use the move, cutting the heavens. Voila! As Ningyu shouted in a low voice, several sword lights separated from the Black Dragon Sword and rushed towards Zhang Kejuan. I can't believe it. Seeing several sword lights rushing towards him, Zhang Kejuan's heart instantly turned cold. Zhang Kejuan was wholeheartedly dealing with the demonic lotus flame in his fist. How could he be in the mood to fight against Ningyu? Through this period of understanding, Zhang Kejuan could almost conclude that the flame in his fist was extremely terrifying. At the very least, it was ranked in the top 10 of the bizarre flame list. Zhang Kejuan was not a fool. It would be very difficult to escape in a short period of time after being entangled by these flames. This is infuriating. Zhang Kejuan's lungs were about to explode. He had the will, but not the strength. If it was before, Zhang Kejuan could still use his trump card to deal with Ningyu. But now, he didn't even have a way to use his trump card. The demonic lotus flame was like a parasite. Once it stuck into his body, it would be very difficult to get rid of it. Zhang Kejuan had very few choices in front of him. They could either cut off one of their arms or be killed by Ning Yu's attack. Zhang Kejuan knew that he had to make a choice. It was impossible for him to survive and keep his arm. I will settle this score sooner or later. Zhang Kejuan gritted his teeth and decided to abandon his right arm first before using his trump card to fight against Ningyu. As for the grudge of losing his arm, Zhang Kejuan wanted to blame it on Ningyu. You're quite bold. Zhang Kejuan's action of raising his left arm made Ning Yu feel slightly disappointed. Ning Yu's heart was as clear as a mirror. He knew very well what Zhang Kejuan meant when he raised his left arm. He had to cut off his right arm and abandon his right arm. Since Zhang Kejuan did this, it meant that Zhang Kejuan had revived the certain death situation. Something's wrong. Suddenly, Ning Yu seemed to have discovered something terrifying and hurriedly retreated. Rumble. Ning Yu had only retreated a few steps when the space where he had been standing suddenly exploded. A figure appeared in the blasted void. A saint. Sensing the terrifying aura emanating from this figure, Ning Yu's face turned extremely ugly. Ning Yu had never expected that a saint would appear at such a crucial moment. It was no exaggeration to say that this saint's aura concealment technique was too brilliant. It was one thing for Ning Yu not to discover his existence, but even the demonic human who had left not long ago did not discover him. The demonic human had recovered to the peak of mid-stage saint, but even he could not discover the martial artist in front of him. This was enough to show how terrifying this martial artist's concealment technique was. Whoosh! After this saint appeared, the first thing he did was not to kill Ning Yu, but to casually disperse the sword ray that Ning Yu had slashed out. Although Ning Yu was an early-stage Sky Supreme, and his sky-severing sword ray was extremely powerful, it was still lacking in front of a saint. After casually dispersing the sword ray that Ning Yu had slashed out, this saint easily forced out the demonic lotus flame in Zhang Kejuan's right hand. Uncle Chang, this time I really have to thank. The saint's sudden appearance made Zhang Kejuan overjoyed. The saint called Uncle Chang waved his hand, interrupting Zhang Kejuan's words. He said indifferently, "You don't have to thank me. This is my duty. You are the Zhang family's quasi-war god, the most advantageous contender for the next family head. The family head has instructed me to ensure your safety." After saying this, Uncle Chang turned his head to look at Ning Yu. Then his figure gradually became illusory and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Zhang Kejuan's sudden appearance and disappearance made Zhang Kejuan's expression very ugly. Zhang Kejuan was a very arrogant person. It was originally a game between him and Ning Yu, but in the end, he still had to ask Zhang Chang for help. At this moment, Zhang Kejuan had the idea of killing Ning Yu. Regardless of everything, regardless of the demonic human, regardless of the power behind Ning Yu, Zhang Kejuan wanted to kill Ning Yu and ruthlessly trample on Ning Yu. Kid, I admit that you are very strong. However, in front of me, you are destined to regret being born into this world. The moment the idea of killing Ning Yu appeared, it lingered in Zhang Kejuan's mind. Zhang Kejuan stared fiercely at Ning Yu and said coldly, "I gave you a chance. As long as you knelt down and kowtowed to me a few times, then let go of your mind and let me control you. I will spare your life." Speaking up to this point, Zhang Kejuan paused for a moment before continuing. "The opportunity was placed in front of you, but you did not know how to cherish it. You can't blame me for this." After saying this, Zhang Kejuan's hands waved continuously. He had decided to use his trump card, Buzz. However, Zhang Kejuan was destined to have a tragic ending. His trump card had only been used halfway when he hurriedly stopped. There was no other reason. It was because Jean Kidjuan noticed that the void in the number 1 private room had begun to tremble. 3 figures rapidly flew out of the void. The demonic human, the middle-aged man, and Di Tianming. These 3 martial artists were the 3 martial artists who had gone out to fight not long ago. Moreover, judging from their current state, Jean Kidjuan was almost certain that Di Tianming and the middle-aged man had not gained any advantage. This was because Di Tianming and the middle-aged man's expressions were extremely ugly, extremely ugly. Seeing this, Jean Kidjuan hurriedly stopped using his trump card. Unable to use his trump card, Jean Kidjuan's heart was bleeding. One had to know that once Jean Kidjuan used his trump card, it was very difficult to stop it. If he wanted to stop using his trump card, there was only one way, and that was to use another trump card to stop it. In other words, the appearance of Di Tianming and the demonic human had caused Jean Kidjuan to lose 2 trump cards. 2 trump cards that could save his life. Due to the sudden return of the demonic human and Di Tianming, the atmosphere in the number 1 private room became a little gloomy. Fortunately, this gloomy atmosphere did not last long before it was broken by the middle-aged man. Cough, cough. The middle-aged man first coughed twice, attracting the attention of the demonic human and Ningyu. He then said in a clear voice, "I, Sun Deshan, represent Emperor Divine Palace to welcome the 2 of you." The words of the middle-aged man, who was also Sun Deshan, made Jean Kidjuan a little dumbfounded. Didn't he go with Di Tianming to test the demonic human strength? Why did this happen? Chapter 1721. Chapter 1721. A large number of sages Jean Kidjuan felt worse than if he had eaten sh*T. Ningyu was about to be defeated by him. Who would have thought that the guard next to Ningyu would suddenly return? The guard's return was secondary. What mattered was Sun Deshan's attitude towards the guard. This attitude made Jean Kidjuan feel a little uneasy. Feeling uneasy, Jean Kidjuan used a secret skill unique to the Zhang family and started to communicate with Di Tianming. What's going on? Why does Sun Deshan treat that warrior like this? Jean Kidjuan went straight to the point, not beating around the bush in the slightest, and asked directly. The human demon is very powerful. Sun Deshan and I are no match for him, even if we work together. Di Tianming's face also darkened at the mention of the human demon. Di Tianming's expression turned even more unsightly when he recalled the fight with the human demon just now. It was extremely unsightly. After leaving the first skybox, he and Sun Deshan hurriedly chased after the human demon. They wanted to probe the human demon's strength. At the same time, all the sages in Emperor City took action to cheer for them. But Di Tianming had ignored the human demon's speed from the beginning. After leaving the first sky room, Di Tianming and Sun Deshan couldn't catch up with the human demon, no matter how fast they sped up. This situation lasted until they were far away from the sages behind them. The human demon stopped. Although the human demon's behavior was a little abnormal, Di Tianming and Sun Deshan still decided to go all out to test the human demon. The result surprised Di Tianming and Sun Deshan. The human demon only threw 2 punches, and Di Tianming and Sun Deshan were defeated. Di Tianming was fine. He only fell back a few feet, but he didn't fall or spit blood. Sun Deshan's situation was much worse than Di Tianming's. Not only did he fall to the ground, but he also spit blood and looked pale. One move. The human demon's one move made Di Tianming and Sun Deshan realize how terrifying his strength was. Di Tianming and Sun Deshan thought that even if the human demon hadn't reached the mid-stage sage, he was infinitely close to it. Di Tianming and Sun Deshan did not dare to be careless when facing a human demon who was at the intermediate stage of the sage realm or was infinitely close to it. Thus, Di Tianming and Sun Deshan immediately compromised and decided to introduce the human demon to the Darch palace. Even you and Sun Deshan together weren't a match for that human demon. Zhang Kejuan's eyes widened and his jaw almost dropped. Zhang Kejuan was well aware of Di Tianming and Sun Deshan's strength. In Zhang Kejuan's opinion, if Di Tianming and Sun Deshan joined forces, no sage primary stage expert would be a match for them. Now that Di Tianming had personally admitted that the human demon was very powerful, didn't that mean that the human demon's cultivation had reached the middle stage of the sage realm? Thinking of this, Zhang Kejuan was even more surprised. As the number one genius of the Zhang family in the demon spirit realm and a quasi-war god, Zhang Kejuan knew what the intermediate stage of the sage realm meant. Sage intermediate stage martial artists represented the peak of the demon spirit realm and immortal spirit realm. If the human demon was really a warrior at the middle stage of the sage realm, wouldn't their trip to the Emperor Divine Palace end in failure? Not only would he fail the mission, but it was also unknown whether he would be able to keep his life. Can we activate the defensive formation of the Emperor's city to deal with him? Zhang Kejuan rolled his eyes and proposed a feasible plan. Although Zhang Kejuan wasn't from the Emperor Divine Palace, he still had some understanding of the defensive formation of the Emperor's city. Once the defensive formation was activated, it would be difficult for the human demon to leave the Emperor's city, even if he was really a middle-stage sage. The key to activating the defensive formation lies with Sun Deshan. Ever since we returned to the Emperor's city, I have been reminding him to activate the defensive formation, but he has been indifferent. It would have been fine if Zhang Kejuan hadn't mentioned the defensive formation, but the moment he mentioned it, Di Tianming was furious. In order to make Sun Deshan activate the defensive formation, Di Tianming had racked his brains. In the end, it wasn't satisfactory. Sun Deshan was like a deaf person, and he didn't respond at all. This situation made Di Tianming want to throw a few punches at Sun Deshan and ask him what was going through his mind. Lead the way. Let's go to the Emperor Divine Palace now. Just as Di Tianming and Zhang Kejuan were secretly communicating, the human demon's voice was heard in the number 1 sky room. Yes, I will take you there now. Sun Deshan's reaction once again refreshed Di Tianming and Zhang Kejuan's understanding. If it wasn't for the human demon's mild anger, Sun Deshan would have nodded and bowed. However, even if he didn't nod and bow, Sun Deshan's attitude towards the human demon was extremely respectful. As soon as the human demon's voice was heard, Sun Deshan was the first to act and rushed out of the number 1 sky room. Behind Sun Deshan, Ningyu and the human demon left the number 1 sky room side by side and disappeared in the blink of an eye. What should we do? Di Tianming looked at the empty room and asked. Although Di Tianming's cultivation was higher than Zhang Kejuan's status in the Zhang clan was much higher than Di Tianming's. The reason why Di Tianming followed Zhang Kejuan this time was to let the Emperor Divine Palace see the Zhang clan strength, and also to ensure Zhang Kejuan's safety. One was in the light, while the other was in the dark. The Zhang clan attached great importance to Zhang Kejuan's safety, to the Emperor Divine Palace. Zhang Kejuan clenched his fists, and an extremely vicious murderous look appeared in his eyes. Zhang Kejuan was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. He had lost face to Ningyu and the human demon, so he had to get back at them. Zhang Kejuan already had a general idea of how to get back at them. However, the premise of everything was based on a situation where they didn't get left behind by Ningyu and the human demon. Therefore, in order to keep up with Ningyu and the human demon, Zhang Kejuan tore the void with both hands and immediately went in. Since Zhang Kejuan had already taken action, Di Tianming naturally wouldn't delay. However, before leaving, Di Tianming didn't forget to inform the Zhang clan sages around him. Di Tianming asked the sages to stay in the Emperor's city and wait for his and Zhang Kejuan's return. Whoosh! Sun Deshan was from the Emperor Divine Palace. With him leading the way, Ning Yu and the human demon didn't have to worry about running into trouble at the later stages. After all, Sun Deshan had the cultivation of an early-stage sage. In the Emperor Divine Palace, the cultivation of an early-stage sage was enough to rank at the top. Along the way, Ning Yu was very puzzled. Ning Yu's doubts were about Sun Deshan. From the human demon, Ning Yu learned that Sun Deshan's cultivation was at the peak of the early-stage sage, and he was already under control. Ning Yu didn't care how the human demon controlled Sun Deshan. What Ning Yu cared about was why a large number of sage realm warriors suddenly appeared in the Emperor Divine Palace. After all, the Emperor Divine Palace had spent so much manpower and resources to mine the sacred grade primordial crystal mine in the Moling Mountains in order for the one-armed warrior to smoothly advance to the early-stage sage. At that time, Ning Yu was almost certain that even if there were sages in the Emperor Divine Palace, there wouldn't be too many. At most, there would be one. Chapter 1722. Chapter 1722. Chapter 1722. Courting Death. Ning Yu did not know why a large number of sages had suddenly appeared in Divine Emperor Palace. But Ning Yu knew that something must have happened to Divine Emperor Palace. As for what had happened to the Emperor Divine Palace, he would have to go there to find out. Ning Yu glanced at Sun Deshan, who was rushing ahead, then at the human demon beside him, and then at Di Tianming and Zhang Kejuan behind him. Ning Yu couldn't help but feel worried. The human demon's true cultivation was at the peak of mid-stage sage realm, and his battle prowess was also at this level. To be honest, Ning Yu did not feel safe with the cultivation of a peak mid-stage human demon saint. It's better to prepare early. With a thought, Ning Yu contacted the little Qilin in the Tower of Yuzuan. Ning Yu was very confident in little Qilin's strength. Even though little Qilin only had the cultivation of an early-stage sage, Ning Yu felt that it could fight against an early-stage sage. Ning Yu contacted little Qilin for a full 10 minutes before little Qilin gave Ning Yu a reply. "I'm very weak now. Before I recover, you'd better not look for me again." After listening to the little Qilin's reply, Ning Yu's mouth was slightly agape, a little dumbfounded. After such a long time, the little Qilin still hadn't recovered. At the same time, Ning Yu had a headache. If little Qilin couldn't help, it meant that human demons would be the main force against Emperor Divine Palace. Back in the Moling Mountain Range, Ning Yu had a lot of confidence in the human demon. But now, Ning Yu's mood wasn't that optimistic. The reason was the unforeseen event that had occurred in the Emperor God Palace. We'll reach the main entrance of the Emperor God Palace after passing through the barrier in front. Leading Ning Yu and the human demon, Sun Deshan finally stopped in front of a snow-white barrier. Pointing at the white barrier, Sun Deshan explained, "This barrier is very special. Only the people from the Emperor Palace can enter. If anyone else tries to barge in, they will trigger the surrounding killing formations and kill them." "You mean we can't go in?" Human demon frowned slightly. No, that's not what I meant." Sun Deshan hurriedly waved his hand and said, "I just want you to wait here for a while. I'll go in and inform the people of the Emperor Palace, and then—" "No need. I have a way to break the barrier." The human demon waved his hand, interrupting Sun Deshan. In the next moment, the demonic human took a step forward, clenched his fists, and punched out. Whoosh! Whoosh! In a split second, 2 rays of cold light shot out and rushed towards the white barrier at a terrifying speed. "No!" Seeing the human demon suddenly attack, Sun Deshan hurriedly cried out, wanting to stop the human demon. However, Sun Deshan was clearly half a beat too late to stop the human demon. Chi! Chi! In the blink of an eye, 2 beams of cold light blasted the white barrier. A sizzling sound rang out. Then the white barrier caved in, and a gap suddenly appeared. "Go!" The human demon grabbed Ningyu and passed through the gap. This is bad. Seeing that Ningyu and the human devil had crossed the barrier, Sun Deshan knew that he was done for. He hurriedly chased after them. At the rear, Zhang Kejuan and Di Tianming were extremely reluctant to pass through the barrier. Before coming to Emperor Palace, Zhang Kejuan had investigated Emperor Palace and knew everything about it like the back of his hand. There were several theories about the white barrier in front of Emperor Palace. The most convincing theory was that the white barrier was connected to Emperor Palace's palace-protecting grand formation. Once the white barrier was forcibly broken, it would immediately activate the palace-protecting grand formation. For this reason, Zhang Kejuan really didn't want to follow, but there was nothing he could do. In order to get back at Ningyu, in order to reach an agreement with Emperor Palace, he had to follow them. Whoosh! Whoosh! Zhang Kejuan and Di Tianming followed closely, passing through the white barrier in the blink of an eye. Whoosh! No one noticed. There was another figure that passed through the white barrier with Zhang Kejuan and Di Tianming. It was just that almost no one noticed that figure. Rumble. As it turned out, Sun Deshan's warning was correct. As soon as they passed through the white barrier, Human Demon and Ningyu were hit by a terrifying attack. On the other side of the white barrier, the void trembled and countless cold rays of light rushed out of the void, blasting toward Ningyu and Human Demon. Since Ningyu and Human Demon were the first to pass through the barrier, most of the cold rays of light regarded them as the number one enemy. As for Sun Deshan, Zhang Kejuan, and Di Tianming, they were under much less pressure. Child's play. Human Demon obviously didn't care about the cold rays of light that were attacking him. He waved his right hand casually, and in an instant, several palm prints flew out and collided with the cold rays of light. Whoosh! The cold rays and the palm prints collided. The result was a little beyond Sun Deshan's expectations. It was Human Demon's palm prints that won. Is there something wrong with the palace-protecting grand formation? Sun Deshan's mouth was slightly open. His first thought was that there was something wrong with the palace-protecting grand formation. When Sun Deshan and the other saints arrived at Emperor Palace, the first thing they did was to strengthen the palace-protecting grand formation to ensure that the invaders would suffer. Sun Deshan couldn't believe the current situation. The formation that was strengthened by the power of several saints was actually no match for Human Demon. Not many people would believe this if word got out. That's all. After casually repelling the cold rays of light, Human Demon curled his lips and said indifferently, "It seems that there's nothing scary about Emperor Palace." As he spoke, Human Demon raised his head and looked at the main gate of Emperor Palace in the distance. His right foot stepped on the ground, and his figure quickly swept over. Judging from Human Demon's words, it was obvious that he wanted to force his way into Emperor Palace. Trespassers of Emperor Palace, die. Before the Human Demon came to the front gate of the Sovereign Palace, a robust voice resounded from the Sovereign Palace. Creak! Then the main door of the Emperor Palace slowly opened, and two figures strode out of the Emperor Palace. Ningyu's eyes moved and fell on the two figures. Ningyu wasn't familiar with one of the figures, but from the aura exuding from his body, Ningyu guessed that he should be at the early stage of Saint Realm. As for the other figure, Ningyu couldn't be more familiar with him. The current palace master of Emperor Palace, Di Shao. Ningyu only had one thought in his mind about Di Shao, the executioner who broke up his family in this life, and that was to kill him. However, Ningyu was very clear that with his current strength, even if he used all his trump cards, he would still be no match for Di Shao. This was because Di Zhao's cultivation had increased by a small level compared to when he went to Moling Mountain Range not long ago. Early stage of Saint Realm. Not long ago, Di Zhao was still at the half stage of Saint Realm. Not long after, Di Zhao's cultivation had actually increased to the early stage of Saint Realm. So it's you little bastard. When Ning Yu noticed Di Zhao's eyes also fell on Ning Yu. Chapter 1723. Chapter 1723. Betrayal. Old dog, we're doomed to end the feud between us today. Ning Yu clenched his fists, and a ferocious look appeared on his face. Di Zhao had destroyed his family, and he had to avenge it. At this moment, Ning Yu even wanted to use the Qilin life blood. The Qilin life blood was comparable to the true dragon life blood, and it contained extremely terrifying energy. With Ning Yu's current cultivation, he had no chance of winning even against a half-saint, let alone an early-stage saint like Di Zhao. However, since the enemy had already said so much, if they were to retreat blindly, they would be completely suppressed by the other party in terms of momentum. Therefore, Ning Yu secretly made up his mind. Today, even if he had to use the Qilin lifeblood and risk the risk of being devoured, he would let Di Zhao know who he could and could not offend. Ha ha ha. Di Zhao seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. He threw his head back and laughed wildly, and then said in a sinister tone, "A mere early-stage sky supreme trash wants to end things with me? You're overestimating yourself." As soon as he said the word strength, Di Zhao's figure flashed, and he rushed towards Ning Yu. Di Zhao's intention was clear. He wanted to severely injure Ning Yu, and let Ning Yu know what cruelty was. Seeing Di Zhao approaching him, Ning Yu did not dare to be careless. He hurriedly separated a wisp of his soul power into his storage ring, and wanted to use the Qilin life blood. Come back! However, before Ning Yu could use the Qilin life blood, the other martial artist who came out with Di Zhao said in a deep voice, "Stay aside and don't speak without my permission." Swish! Di Zhao had originally wanted to severely injure Ning Yu, but the sudden shout in his ear made him not dare to have the slightest bit of hesitation. He immediately turned around and returned to the back of another warrior. The sudden change not only surprised Ning Yu, but even the human demon was a little shocked. Moving his eyes, the human demon's eyes fell on the other martial artist. Middle-stage saint. The human demon's perception was much stronger than Ning Yu's. Ning Yu deduced that the warrior in front of Emperor Shao was at the early stage of Saint Realm, but the human devil deduced that the warrior was at the middle stage of Saint Realm. Even though he knew that the other party was a mid-stage saint, the human demon did not show any fear. There was no other reason. The other party was only at the saint intermediate stage and had not reached the peak of the saint intermediate stage. In other words, a single human demon could easily deal with several martial artists of this level. Hee, an esteemed guest has arrived. Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you. The warrior in front of Emperor Shao smiled at the human devil and said, "Let me introduce myself. My name is He Jiming." "I don't care if you're He Jiming or Zhou Jiming. I only have one request today." The human demon didn't give He Jiming any face. He raised his right hand, pointed at Di Zhao, and said, "Take his life." Hua! The human demon's words made He Jiming's face darken. He Jiming thought that speaking to the human devil in this tone was already giving the human devil enough face. Who would have thought that the human demon would not know when to back down and would actually want to kill Di Zhao in front of him? No matter what, Di Zhao was the current palace lord of Emperor God Palace, and his talent was extremely high. One of the reasons he came down from a higher plane this time was because of Di Zhao. Now that the human demon wanted to kill Di Zhao, how could He Jiming tolerate it? "I'm giving you face, but you don't want it." He Jiming was thoroughly enraged. The anger on his face burst out unabashedly. "Sun Deshan, what are you waiting for? I order you to act now and take down this arrogant bastard." He Jiming stared at Sun Deshan and said coldly. He Jiming was no fool. On the contrary, being sent down from a higher plane, He Jiming was very, very smart and could be said to be extraordinarily intelligent. Because the human demon had slightly concealed his aura, He Jiming didn't know what the human demon's cultivation was. To be on the safe side, He Jiming would definitely let Sun Deshan test the human demon's strength first before deciding whether or not to suppress the human demon. This, hearing He Jiming's order, Sun Deshan's entire face turned bitter. It's better to make enemies than to resolve them. In my opinion, we should all sit down and have a good talk, lest both sides suffer. Biting his lip, Sun Deshan said something that greatly angered He Jiming. The human demon was about to kill Di Xiao, and you actually said something like it's better to make enemies than to resolve them. This was simply boosting the other's morale and diminishing your own prestige. He Jiming was especially furious. In fact, Sun Deshan was very helpless, extremely helpless. He Jiming didn't know, but his heart was as clear as a mirror. The control of his body no longer belonged to him. Not long ago, when he was chasing after the human demon with Di Tianming, he was already controlled by the human demon. It could be said that if the human demon wanted him dead by midnight, he would definitely not live past midnight. Going against the human demon for He Jiming? Sun Deshan wasn't that stupid. In fact, Sun Deshan even made a simple analysis of the current situation. In terms of raw strength, He Jiming wasn't the human demon's match. Even if all the sages from the higher planes joined forces, they still might not be the human demon's match. Under this premise, even if the human demon wanted him to attack He Jiming, he would do it without hesitation. Sun Deshan, I'll give you one last chance. Taking a deep breath, He Jiming tried his best to calm himself down. The more critical the moment, the less flustered he was. This was the main reason He Jiming was sent down. Kill him, and I'll pretend today's matter never happened. Otherwise, I'll hand you over to the disciplinary hall. He Jiming pointed at the human demon and said coldly, "This is your last chance. I hope you don't do anything stupid. Kill Di Xiao." Before Sun Deshan could answer, He Jiming, the human demon's words came out. "Xiao." As soon as the human demon's voice fell, Sun Deshan dashed towards Di Xiao without another word. Even though Di Xiao was behind He Jiming, and killing Di Xiao required a direct confrontation with He Jiming, Sun Deshan didn't hesitate. Because there were only two paths in front of Sun Deshan. If he killed Di Xiao, he had a chance of survival. If he didn't kill Di Xiao, he would die without a doubt. One thought gave him a chance to live, the other a chance to die. Even a fool would know what to choose. "You've disappointed me too much." Looking at Sun Deshan's foolish choice, He Jiming's eyes revealed a trace of disappointment. This look of disappointment only appeared in He Jiming's eyes for a second, and it disappeared after a second. "Leave him to me." Just as He Jiming was about to kill Sun Deshan himself, Di Xiao took a step forward and said, "Let me get rid of this scum of the sect." All right, He Jiming originally wanted to kill Sun Deshan himself, but after hearing Di Xiao's words, he nodded lightly and took a few steps back. If Di Xiao could kill Sun Deshan himself, then even if he went to a higher plane, he wouldn't be marginalized. It was equivalent to having an umbrella of protection. Chapter 1724. Chapter 1724. Chapter 1724. Standpoint Kill. After getting He Jiming's approval, Di Xiao's eyes lit up with excitement. Although he had become a sage, Di Xiao knew very well that his position in the hearts of He Jiming and the others was not high. If he could kill Sun Deshan, he would be able to prove himself. He would be able to prove that he was worthy of their attention. With a low growl, Di Xiao charged forward instead of retreating. In the blink of an eye, he was already far away. In the first move, Di Xiao did not hold back. A terrifying amount of primordial qi gathered on his fist, which fiercely collided with Sun Deshan's fist. Bang! The two fists collided. A crisp sound rang out and spread out in all directions. Whoosh! Whoosh! After one move, the two figures retreated rapidly. Di Xiao is so strong. The first exchange between Sun Deshan and Di Xiao had completely overturned Ning Yu's knowledge. From Ning Yu's point of view, Di Xiao had just reached the early stage of the Saint Realm, so he was definitely no match for Sun Deshan. However, it seemed that Di Xiao and Sun Deshan were evenly matched. This discovery almost made Ning Yu cry out. If Di Xiao had been an ordinary early-stage Saint Realm warrior, Ning Yu might have been able to contend with him after activating his Qilin blood. Who would have thought that Di Xiao, an early-stage Sage Realm warrior, could be on par with Sun Deshan, who was at the peak of the early-stage Sage Realm? This was rather awkward. No matter how confident Ning Yu was in himself and in his Qilin blood, he knew that he was no match for Sun Deshan. Even if he used his Qilin origin blood, it was impossible for him to defeat Sun Deshan. Therefore, now that Di Xiao and Sun Deshan were evenly matched, Ning Yu was shocked speechless. This Di Xiao is indeed very strong. He can actually fight evenly with Sun Deshan, who only has 50% of his strength. His martial arts talent is just so. As if sensing the shock in Ning Yu's voice, the human demon nodded. But no matter how strong he is destined to be killed today. I can't believe it. Hearing the human demon's words, Ning Yu cursed. The worry in his heart lessened a little. In the previous exchange, Ning Yu knew that Di Xiao had used his full strength. Di Xiao had used his full strength, while Sun Deshan had only used 50% of his strength. It seemed that Di Xiao was not as strong as he had imagined. Sun Deshan, between you and Di Xiao, only one can live. The human demon didn't notice the change in Ning Yu's expression. He said in a clear voice, "Him or you, it's your choice." Boom! The human demon's words exploded in Sun Deshan's ears like a bomb. Die! Sun Deshan knew that he had not used his full strength in the first move, which had angered the human demon. If he lost the human demon's trust, then his little life would come to an end. Taking a deep breath, Sun Deshan decided to launch a powerful attack and kill Di Xiao with a single strike. Sun Deshan had thought of a way out for himself. After killing Di Xiao with a single strike, he returned to the human demon's side before He Jiming and the other saints could react. This was the only way he could keep his life. Otherwise, even if he killed Di Xiao, He Jiming and the other saints were bound to kill him. Cold words came out of Sun Deshan's mouth. In the next instant, Sun Deshan tore through the void and dove in. Wang! The moment Sun Deshan's foot entered the void, he appeared in front of Di Xiao. Clenching his right hand into a fist, Sun Deshan threw a punch that brought along a raging gale of Yuan Qi, right at Di Xiao's heart. Since he had decided to kill Di Xiao, Sun Deshan would not hold back. Killing Di Xiao with a single strike was Sun Deshan's only chance of survival. Not good. Di Xiao did not expect Sun Deshan to be so terrifying. His first thought was not to fight Sun Deshan head-on, but to dodge to the side. But Di Xiao had obviously underestimated Sun Deshan. In order to survive, Sun Deshan had used all his strength. The speed of Sun Deshan's punch was twice as fast as usual. Bang! Even though Di Xiao tried his best to dodge, he could not avoid Sun Deshan's punch. The iron-like fist landed on Di Xiao's body with no way to dodge. Fortunately, Di Xiao reacted in time and moved his body slightly to the side, which made Sun Deshan's fist only hit on his chest instead of his heart. Otherwise, Sun Deshan's punch would have been enough to make Di Xiao go home and plant sweet potatoes. Even so, Di Xiao also tasted the pain. Sun Deshan's fist landed on Di Xiao's chest, and several of his ribs were broken. Puchi! Di Xiao's breath dropped from the early stage sage realm to the freezing point. I can't let Di Xiao live. Although Di Xiao was seriously injured, he was not dead. As long as Di Xiao was alive, Sun Deshan would feel very uneasy. Looking back at human demon's cold face, Sun Deshan gritted his teeth and decided to follow up. He must eliminate Di Xiao. Crash! However, before Sun Deshan could reach Di Xiao, The void around him suddenly split open, and several figures rushed out. Damn it! The sudden appearance of several figures made Sun Deshun's face turn extremely ugly. Sun Deshun knew these warriors. They were all warriors who had descended from a higher plane with him. Although Sun Deshun's strength was enough to rank in the top 2 among this batch of Sage Realm warriors, he still felt his scalp go numb. Sun Deshun was not afraid of facing one alone, but facing so many people at the same time, even Sun Deshun felt that it was very difficult. Come back. At this time, Human Demon waved his hand, indicating for Sun Deshun to come back first. Good, good, good. Human Demon's words were even more pleasant to Sun Deshun's ears than the sound of nature. Sun Deshun hurriedly turned around and quickly returned to Human Demon's side. The sudden appearance of more than a dozen sages instantly broke the balance of the situation. On Divine Emperor Palace's side, He Jiming and more than a dozen sages, plus Di Shao with broken ribs, formed an extremely terrifying force. On Human Demon's side, other than Human Demon himself, there were only Sun Deshun and Ningyu. As for Di Tianming and Zhang Kejuan, their faces were very ugly at the moment. They wanted to stand on the same side as Divine Emperor Palace, but they did not dare to act rashly. One had to know that they were very close to Human Demon. If they angered him, they would definitely not have a good ending. If Human Demon behaved a little closer to them, it would be terrible. You too come here. For Di Tianming and Zhang Kejuan, whatever they feared had come true. Hearing Human Demons in different words, they almost cried out loud. In the current situation, even ghosts knew that He Jiming had the absolute upper hand. Now that Human Demon had dragged them into the water, he really had ulterior motives. Resist. Zhang Kejuan and Di Tianming looked at each other and saw the determination in each other's eyes. If they were tied to Human Demon, they would definitely be finished. Therefore, Zhang Kejuan and Di Tianming immediately decided to cut off relations with Human Demon. We are from the demonic spirit realm Zhang family. This time, we came mainly to ally with Divine Emperor Palace. Where did you clowns come from? How dare you behave so atrociously here? Chapter 1725. Devouring Vortex Zhang Kejuan concluded. As long as he and the Human Demon were clear, He Jiming would definitely be on his side. The Human Demon's cultivation was at the peak of the mid-stage Saint Realm, coupled with Sun Deshun, who was at the peak of the early-stage Saint Realm. His strength was terrifying. He Jiming and a dozen early-stage Saint Realm experts alone might not be a match for the Human Demon and the others. At this time, if Di Tianming helped to restrain Sun Deshun, then He Jiming and a dozen early-stage Saint Realm experts would have a high chance of killing the Human Demon. Therefore, Zhang Kejuan concluded that He Jiming would definitely be on his side. When we fight later, you only have one task. The Human Demon's expression was indifferent. Without even looking at Zhang Kejuan, he directly said to Ningyu, I don't care what method you use. In short, just take his life. Understood. Ningyu nodded heavily. Ningyu was very clear about his own strength. Under the premise that he didn't use his Qilin origin blood, he could only contend with Zhang Kejuan among the martial artists in this area. Now that the Human Demon handed Zhang Kejuan to him, he naturally wouldn't refuse. Kill. The Human Demon didn't waste any time. After hastily instructing Ningyu, he dashed toward Di Tianming at high speed. Boom! Displaying the aura of a peak mid-stage Saint Realm expert, the Human Demon used his full strength in his first move to directly kill Di Tianming. Zhang Chang, save me. Seeing that he was the Human Demon's first target, Di Tianming retreated while shouting for help. Buzz! As soon as Zhang Chang's cry for help sounded, the void trembled, and Zhang Chang appeared out of thin air. Bang! As soon as he appeared, Zhang Chang clenched his right hand into a fist and collided with the human demons. The two fists collided, and a crisp sound rang out. Then, two figures retreated in a straight line, one after the other. What? This Zhang Chang's strength is so terrifying. No wonder that half-saint brat dared to be so arrogant. It turns out that he has something to rely on. The first exchange between Zhang Chang and the human demon caused the surrounding saints to exclaim. The human demon was at the peak of the sage intermediate stage. The fact that Zhang Chang could fight evenly with the human demon was enough to show how powerful he was. Without using the trump card given to me by the sect, it is impossible for me to be a match for the two of them. He Jiming's eyes were fixed on human demon and Zhang Chang. His heart was in turmoil. In the beginning, He Jiming had roughly estimated the human demon's battle prowess. According to He Jiming's speculations, the human demon's strength should be on par with his. But now, after seeing the fight between the two, He Jiming knew that he was wrong, very wrong. Under normal circumstances, the two of them would not be a match for the human devil. However, He Jiming was not particularly worried. He came from a higher plane and had a trump card left behind for him by his sect. Once he used his trump card, He Jiming believed that the human demon was no match for him. Let the two of them fight each other first. When their strength is almost exhausted, I will come out to clean up the mess. He Jiming's lips curled into a smile as he swept his gaze across the surrounding Saint Martialists. He Jiming came from a higher plane. He didn't care about the devil's spirit realm, the Zhang family, the Bai family, or the Yin family. In He Jiming's heart, apart from the people of Emperor God Palace, everyone was an enemy. Ha ha ha. The fight between human demon and Zhang Chang did not affect Zhang Kejuan. Instead, Zhang Kejuan threw his head back and laughed. Your umbrella is gone. Let's see if you can survive this. As soon as the word die fell, Zhang Kejuan quickly rushed out. Terrifying yuan qi fluctuations erupted from his body as he fiercely charged at Ningyu. Zhang Kejuan was most afraid of human demon. Now that human demon was entangled by Zhang Chang, Zhang Kejuan naturally had no scruples. Zhang Chang entangled human demon while Di Tianming stared at Sun Deshan. On the other side, He Jiming chose to bide his time. Everything was extremely beneficial to Zhang Kejuan. Zhang Kejuan had made up his mind to kill Ningyu. He must not give Ningyu a chance to live. Black Dragon Sword. Ning, you did not waste time talking to Zhang Kejuan. He directly took out the Black Dragon Sword, injected the yuan qi in his sea of consciousness and slashed out. Qi, a waist-thick sword light, peeled off from the Black Dragon Sword, drew a beautiful arc in the air, and chopped straight toward Zhang Kejuan. Insignificant skill. Because of his previous experience with Ningyu, Zhang Kejuan learned to be smart this time. On the surface, Zhang Kejuan showed a sloppy look, as if he did not take Ningyu seriously at all. But in reality, that was not the case. This time, Zhang Kejuan focused 120%. This was because Zhang Kejuan knew that whether or not he could reach an agreement with He Jiming and the others, his fight with Ningyu would play a key role. As long as he could easily kill Ningyu, He Jiming would definitely think highly of him and the Devil's Spirit Realm's Zhang family. Therefore, Zhang Kejuan used his trump card as soon as he made his move. Buzz! Zhang Kejuan suddenly stopped in midair and made a grabbing motion with his right hand. Then, a small vortex suddenly appeared. After the small vortex appeared, a terrifying devouring power burst out from the vortex. The moment the Black Dragon Sword light that Ningyu slashed out came into contact with the vortex, it was devoured by the devouring power that erupted from the vortex. What? This change obviously caused Ningyu to be slightly surprised. The might of the Black Dragon Sword light was something that even a pinnacle Sky Supreme wouldn't dare to face head-on. But now, Zhang Kejuan had only used a vortex to block the black dragon sword light. Ning Yu's face was dark. He wasn't sure if this was Zhang Kejuan's strongest trump card. If it was, then there was a chance that he could use the demonic lotus flame to kill Zhang Kejuan. If this wasn't Zhang Kejuan's strongest trump card, then it would bode ill for him today. Again, Ning Yu gritted his teeth and injected the yuan qi in his body into the black dragon's sword again, slashing out several more sword lights. Whoosh! The overwhelming sword lights rushed out and slashed at Zhang Kejuan from all directions. Ha ha ha! You want to get close to me with these useless sword lights? What a fool's dream! Zhang Kejuan's unbridled laughter resounded in the area. To Zhang Kejuan, using this trump card to deal with Ning Yu was probably the wisest decision he had made recently. Zhang Kejuan had many trump cards, and any one of them could erupt with extremely powerful power. However, the other trump cards were all one-time attacks. Only this trump card was the devouring vortex. No matter how dense the yuan qi in Ning Yu's body was, or how many sword lights he executed, it was of no use against the devouring vortex. Demonic lotus flame. Hearing Zhang Kejuan's unbridled laughter, Ning Yu decided to use the demonic lotus flame. Through the black dragon's sword lights, Ning Yu roughly determined the devouring vortex's endurance. It would be difficult to use the sword lights or soul power to dissipate the devouring vortex. Chapter 1726. Almost. Ning Yu's goal was to kill Zhang Kejuan. Therefore, Ning Yu would not give up on the chance to destroy the devouring whirlpool. With the black dragon's sword in hand, Ning Yu charged forward. As he advanced, Ning Yu wrapped the demonic lotus flame around the black dragon's sword, hoping to succeed in one try. Have you lost your mind? Seeing Ning Yu's actions, Zhang Kejuan's lips curled up. He said darkly, "Since you want to give me the flying sword, it would be impolite of me to refuse." Even a fool could tell that Ning Yu wanted to use the black dragon's sword to attack the devouring whirlpool. Zhang Kejuan was very confident in the devouring whirlpool's endurance. A mere black dragon sword would definitely not be a threat to the devouring whirlpool. "I'll take the flying sword first, then I'll kill you." Seeing Ning Yu approaching the devouring whirlpool, Zhang Kejuan was a little excited. What? All of a sudden, Zhang Kejuan seemed to have discovered something horrifying, and he immediately shouted, "Xiao!" As Ning Yu approached the devouring whirlpool, he suddenly waved the black dragon's sword in his hand. In an instant, a flame rushed out of the black dragon's sword and entered the devouring whirlpool. Chi-chi! The devouring whirlpool could block the sword light and soul power, but it could not block the exotic flame. Under the attack of the demonic lotus flame, the devouring whirlpool was completely destroyed in an instant. "Ah, I want you dead." Seeing the devouring whirlpool destroyed, Zhang Kejuan shouted crazily, wanting to use his second trump card. However, how could Ning Yu give Zhang Kejuan the chance to use his second trump card? Zhang Kejuan had just waved his hands when Ning Yu's sword pierced into Zhang Kejuan's chest. Puchi! A tearing pain came from his chest, causing Zhang Kejuan to spit out a mouthful of blood. His aura was rapidly declining. Not good. Originally, Zhang Chang was fighting with the human demon, and the battle between the two sides had reached a white-hot point. However, when Zhang Chang saw Zhang Kejuan vomiting blood after being punched by Ning Yu, he immediately changed his expression and wanted to help. "You dare to be distracted while fighting me? You are simply seeking death." How could the human demon miss such a rare opportunity? Almost at the moment when Zhang Chang was distracted, the human devil suddenly rushed out and punched towards Zhang Chang's head with a violent yuan qi wind. Hit the snake where it hurts. Since there was such a good opportunity, the human demon would not hold back. As long as this punch could hit Zhang Chang's head, Even if Zhang Chang didn't die, his combat effectiveness would drop several times. This was the result that the human demon wanted. Damn it! Zhang Chang knew very well that if he continued to stubbornly help Zhang Kejuan, the human demon would seize the opportunity to injure him. Once he was seriously injured by the human devil, he would definitely die in the following confrontation. For the sake of survival, Zhang Chang cursed inwardly. Soon after, he shouted at Di Tianming, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and go help Zhang Kejuan. If anything happens to Zhang Kejuan, you can forget about living." Yes, hearing Zhang Chang's words, Di Tianming didn't dare tarry. He rushed out, wanting to save Zhang Kejuan before Ning Yu killed him. In truth, Di Tianming was extremely unwilling. Although Di Tianming hadn't fought with Sun Deshan, Sun Deshan's attention was completely on him. If he dared to divert his attention to help Zhang Kejuan, he would definitely be ambushed by Sun Deshan. Di Tianming and Sun Deshan were both at the peak of the primary sage realm, so they were evenly matched in a head-on fight. If one of them ambushed the other would definitely be heavily injured. However, Di Tianming had no other choice. Zhang Kejuan was a quasi-war god of the Zhang clan in the Devil's Spirit realm. His status was much higher than Di Tianming's. If anything happened to Zhang Kejuan, Di Tianming wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Therefore, even at the risk of being heavily injured, Di Tianming still rushed towards Ningyu without hesitation. Whoosh! As expected, as soon as Di Tianming rushed out, Sun Deshan followed closely behind. Before the battle between the demon and Zhang Chang, he had already given Sun Deshan an order. Stop Di Tianming. Therefore, when he saw Di Tianming make a move, Sun Deshan also rushed out without hesitation. He had to stop Di Tianming. Relatively speaking, Sun Deshan faced much more pressure than Di Tianming. If Di Tianming couldn't stop Ningyu, then Ningyu would just kill Zhang Kejuan. Di Tianming wouldn't die immediately. If Sun Deshan couldn't stop Di Tianming, then the demon would kill him immediately. Pressure. Sun Deshan and Di Tianming weren't on the same level at all. I'm the quasi-wargod of the Zhang clan. If you dare to kill me, you'll become the enemy of the entire Zhang clan. Seeing that Ningyu was about to reach him, Zhang Kejuan couldn't help but use the Zhang clan to intimidate Ningyu. Unfortunately, Ningyu was an immortal spirit realm cultivator. Even if he did, he wouldn't have held back, not to mention that he didn't know how powerful the Zhang family was. Even if he spared Zhang Kejuan's life, Zhang Kejuan would definitely become the enemy of Ningyu again after he regrouped. Ningyu saw this clearly. Therefore, he didn't show any mercy. He was determined to kill Zhang Kejuan in one move. Go help him. In front of the main entrance of Emperor God Palace, He Jiming frowned slightly and nodded to the early-stage sage beside him. After much consideration, He Jiming still felt that he should help Zhang Kejuan. He Jiming saved Zhang Kejuan not because he was afraid of the Zhang clan in the demonic spirit realm, but because he wanted to get some benefits from the Zhang clan. Of course, the key to getting benefits was Zhang Kejuan. Therefore, Zhang Kejuan couldn't die. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. He Jiming's voice was heard. The four sage early-stage martial artists beside him rushed out and rushed towards Ningyu from four directions. Retreat. Although Ningyu wanted to kill Zhang Kejuan, he immediately decided to let Zhang Kejuan go when he sensed that there were four initial sage realm experts rushing towards him. He immediately retreated. Where there's life, there's hope. If even the mountain was gone, there would really be no firewood to burn. Whoosh! Di Tianming took a deep breath when he saw the martial artists of Emperor Divine Palace intervening. He turned around and fought with Sun Deshan in a hurry. Since the Emperor Palace had sent four sages, Zhang Kejuan's life was no longer in danger. Since Zhang Kejuan's life was no longer in danger, Di Tianming naturally had to deal with Sun Deshan. Humph! We'll fight later. Human Demon had been paying attention to what was happening on Ningyu's side. When the 4 sages from Emperor God Palace appeared, Human Demon snorted and forced Zhang Chang to retreat. Then he flew out and protected Ningyu behind him. Human Demon's sudden retreat made Zhang Chang look as if he had been relieved of a heavy burden. Because he was worried about Zhang Kejuan, Zhang Chang was suppressed by Human Demon. Now that Human Demon had retreated, the pressure on Zhang Chang instantly disappeared and he became relaxed. We can deal with him together. At this time, Chapter 1727. Chapter 1727. Chapter 1727. Lure the tiger away from the mountain? All right. Hearing He Jiming's words, Zhang Chang responded almost without thinking. Let's join forces and kill this arrogant guy. Zhang Chang was annoyed by the Human Demon. To be honest, Zhang Chang did not think that he was weaker than the Human Devil in terms of raw strength. However, he needed to care about Zhang Kejuan's life, so the Human Demon seized this opportunity. Now that He Jiming came forward to help, Zhang Chang had already sentenced Human Devil to death in his heart. Go! Exchanging glances, He Jiming and Zhang Chang dashed out at the same time, one on the left and one on the right. You are responsible for protecting Ningyu. If anything happens to Ningyu, I will hold you accountable. Seeing He Jiming and Zhang Chang charging at him, the Human Demon didn't respond immediately. Instead, he ordered Sun Deshan. The Human Demon played a key role in Ning Yu's visit to the Emperor Divine Palace. No matter what, the Human Demon would never let Ning Yu be in danger. As long as I am alive, I will never let Ning Yu be threatened. Sun Deshan nodded heavily, revealing a determined look. Sun Deshan's life was in the hands of the Human Demon. If he didn't make his stance clear now, the Human Demon would probably kill him right away to prevent any future troubles. You overestimate yourself. Seeing the Human Demon's arrogance, Zhang Chang revealed a ferocious gaze and said viciously, This day next year will be your death anniversary. Don't talk nonsense with him. Attack with everything you have. He Jiming saw it more clearly than Zhang Chang. As an expert from a high-level plane, He Jiming's horizons were much higher than Zhang Chang's. Since the Human Demon dared to be so arrogant, it meant that he definitely had a trump card to deal with it. At this moment, the only way was to strike with all his strength and deal a fatal blow to the Human Demon before he used his trump card. Otherwise, when the Human Demon used his trump card, the situation would become even more confusing. However, even though He Jiming knew that the Human Demon would use his trump card, he did not reveal it himself. He Jiming had come down from a high-level plane with a very important mission on his shoulders. If he used his trump card now, then the mission would definitely fail. Between the quest and killing the homicidal demon, He Jiming chose the quest without hesitation, giving up the chance to kill the homicidal demon in one strike. Insignificant skill. How could Human Demon not know that Zhang Chang and He Jiming would go all out? With a flick of his wrist, he quickly took out the last drop of Qilin blood and swallowed it in front of everyone. What? Qilin blood? As soon as the Human Demon took out the Qilin origin blood, He Jiming and Zhang Chang's expressions changed. He Jiming came from a higher plane, while Zhang Chang was a peak expert in the devil's spirit realm. The two of them naturally knew what a terrifying thing a Qilin's life blood was. Now that the Human Devil had taken out the Qilin's natal blood, the two of them immediately decided to retreat and avoid the brunt of the attack. Buzz. The facts proved that He Jiming and Zhang Chang's choice was right. As soon as the Qilin blood entered the Human Devil's mouth, the Human Devil used a secret art to fuse it into his body. Half of the Qilin origin blood fiercely suppressed the energy seal in the Human Devil's body, while the other half constantly replenished the Human Devil's meridians. In the next instant, an extremely terrifying aura surged from the Human Devil's body. Late-stage saint. At this moment, the human devil's cultivation broke through to the late-stage saint realm. The human devil didn't let the excitement of the breakthrough get to his head. Instead, he was extremely calm. The human devil knew very well that the reason he could use the Chilean origin blood to break through the barrier and restore his cultivation to the late-stage saint realm was all because of his special physique. After all, in his previous life, the human devil's cultivation had far surpassed that of a saint. At the same time, the human devil knew very well that due to the powerful suppression of the energy seal, he couldn't maintain his late-stage saint cultivation for too long. His preliminary estimate was that after an hour, his cultivation would drop sharply. At that time, let alone He Jiming and Zhang Chang, even a warrior at the early stage of the sage realm could defeat the human devil. The situation was very grim to kill or subdue He Jiming and the others in an hour, because He Jiming, Zhang Chang, and even Di Shao and Zhang Kejuan had retreated back into the Emperor Divine Palace. Moreover, in order to resist the human devil's attack, He Jiming didn't hesitate to activate the palace protecting formation. Swish! The human devil didn't waste even a second. After his cultivation recovered to the late-stage saint realm, he immediately moved and punched the palace protecting formation of the Emperor Divine Palace. Bang! The huge rebound force directly bounced the human devil back. On the other hand, the palace protecting formation of the Emperor Divine Palace didn't move at all. Ha ha ha! So what if you used the Chilean origin blood? You still can't break the palace protecting formation. Standing within the palace protection formation, He Jiming's lips curled into an arc as he said sinisterly, "When the power of your Chilean origin blood weakens, I'll bring everyone out to skin you alive." Senior human devil, why don't we avoid it first? Ningyu knew that the human devil must be under some kind of great pressure after swallowing the Chilean origin blood. Once the pressure passed, the human devil's cultivation would drop to the freezing point. Instead of stubbornly attacking the palace protecting formation of the Emperor Divine Palace, it was better to retreat to the Emperor City and occupy an advantageous position there before fighting with He Jiming and the others. Retreat. The human devil pondered for a moment and felt that Ning Yu's proposal was not bad. To reach the Emperor Palace, they had to pass through the Emperor City. Similarly, to leave the Emperor Palace, they also had to pass through the Emperor City. Therefore, as long as Ning Yu could occupy the Emperor City, they could stop He Jiming and the others from leaving and cut off their contact with the outside world. Under such circumstances, He Jiming and Zhang Chang would definitely send people to break out. The moment they broke out would be the best time for Ning Yu and the human devil. Senior, we can do this first. Although Ning Yu proposed to retreat to the Emperor City, Ning Yu quietly whispered a few words to the human devil during the retreat. The human devil's eyes lit up. He immediately used the clone technique to abandon 2 of his clones and quietly hid in the void. Under the instruction of the human devil, Sun Deshan and the 2 clones rushed to the Emperor City without stopping. The human devil only gave Sun Deshan one task: occupy the Emperor City and delay as much time as possible. In order to survive, Sun Deshan had no choice but to do as the human devil said. Are they really going to attack the Emperor City? Di Tianming's face darkened when he saw the human devil and the others quietly leaving. There were at least a few sage realm overlords of the Zhang family in the Emperor City. If the human devil took Sun Deshan to attack the Emperor City, the Zhang family's overlords would definitely die. Chapter 1728. Chapter 1728. The key. Do you know when the effect of the Chilean life blood will weaken? He Jiming stared at Di Tianming and asked, if we send someone to Emperor City, what should we do if the human demon ambushes us there? Well, He Jiming's words made Di Tianming's mouth slightly open. He was a bit speechless. In fact, Di Tianming also knew that He Jiming's worries were not unreasonable. They were all watching when the human demon swallowed the Chilean lifeblood. A drop of Qilin lifeblood could raise the cultivation of the human demon from the mid-stage to the late stage in a short period of time. Such a terrifying speed of improvement made all of them shudder. If they rashly went to Emperor City at this time, it was very likely that they would be ambushed by the human demon. We still have to go to Emperor City, but not now. He Jiming's attitude softened a little when he saw Zhang Chang's pale face. I will go with you in half an hour to Emperor City. No problem. Zhang Chang nodded, indicating that there was no problem. He Jiming was only worried about when the aura of the human demon would decline. But Zhang Chang had to worry about the safety of the Zhang clan warriors in Emperor City. In order to reach an agreement with Emperor Palace, they brought a lot of sages with them to go to Emperor Palace. It was not good news for the Zhang clan that the human demon retreated to Emperor City at this time. Senior human demon, how long can your late-stage sage cultivation last? Ning Yu asked quietly in the void. Sun Deshan went to Emperor City with his 2 avatars, while Ning Yu and the human demon hid in the void. With the help of the human demon, Ning Yu was not worried about being discovered by He Jiming and the others. After all, the human demon was a person from a higher plane. Although he was suppressed by the energy seal, he was still very experienced in hiding his aura. 1 hour. The human demon did not hide it from Ning Yu. He stretched out a finger and said, My cultivation will drop to the freezing point in an hour, so we only have 1 hour left. Ning Yu's face became a bit solemn when he heard the human demon's words. An hour was not short, but it was not long either. The key point was not the human demon, but He Jiming's group. As long as He Jiming and Zhang Chang left the Emperor Palace within an hour, Ning Yu would have the opportunity to take control of the Emperor Palace, luring the tiger away from the mountain. This move was called luring the tiger away from the mountain. Drip, drip. Time was ticking away. In the void, Ning Yu and human demon were very nervous, and so were He Jiming and Zhang Chang. Both sides were betting. Go. In the blink of an eye, half an hour had passed. He Jiming first unleashed his perception and probed the surroundings for a while. Then, with a wave of his hand, he was the first to fly into the distance. Voila! Seeing He Jiming leave, Zhang Chang and 4 or 5 early-stage Sage Realm cultivators moved quickly and followed closely behind him. As for Di Tianming, Zhang Kejuan, Di Shao, and the rest of the early-stage Saint Realm warriors, they chose to stay in the Emperor Divine Palace. Prepare for both. After all, He Jiming was also worried that human demon would use the trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain. With the help of Di Tianming and the Palace Protection Formation, He Jiming believed that even if human demon hid around, he would not be able to attack the Emperor Palace. Boom! 5 minutes after He Jiming and Zhang Chang left, one of the sages opened the Palace Protection Formation under Di Zhao's instruction. Good chance. Seeing that the Palace Protection Formation was opened, human demon was overjoyed and hurried to rush out of the void. Wait. Before human demon could rush out, Ning Yu grabbed his arm and said in a deep voice, Be careful! Swish! Human demon saw that he did not have much time left, so he was so impulsive when he saw the Palace Protection Formation was opened. Ning Yu's warning immediately made human demon realize that something was wrong. There must be something wrong when something was wrong. He Jiming and Zhang Chang had already left, and Di Shao chose to open the Palace Protection Formation at this time. Human demon forcibly restrained his impulse to attack and carefully spread his powerful perception around. He really didn't leave. This probing made human demon's face turn a little ugly. Fortunately, Ning Yu had reminded him, otherwise he would have rushed out rashly and would have returned empty-handed. He Jiming and Zhang Chang were all hiding at the edge of the Palace Protection Formation. If human demon dared to show his face, they would definitely come out at the first moment and open the Palace Protection Formation. If that happened, the whole plan would collapse. Thank you for the reminder. Taking a deep breath, human demon said to Ning Yu, If it weren't for you, all the plan would have failed. It's what I should have done, Ning Yu said. Right now, Ning Yu and Human Demon were in the same boat. To be precise, Ning Yu's life was completely in Human Demon's hands. If anything were to happen to the Human Devil, Ning Yu would definitely be finished. When are we leaving? In the void next to the Palace Protection Formation, Zhang Chang looked very anxious. They had already delayed for half an hour, and now they were delayed for another 5 minutes. Zhang Chang's lungs were about to explode. There were several sage martial artists from the Zhang family in Emperor City. There were a total of 9 major families in the demon spirit realm, and the Zhang family could only rank in the middle and lower reaches. Once the sage martial artists from the Zhang family in Emperor City were killed by Human Demon, the Zhang family would definitely be in the bottom 3 among the 9 major families. Wait for another 5 minutes. He Jiming said in a deep voice, "We'll leave in 5 minutes." "Okay, we'll wait for the last 5 minutes," Zhang Chang said, gritting his teeth. He had to lower his head. No matter how strong Zhang Chang was, he had to listen to He Jiming. After all, this was Emperor Palace, and there were more than a dozen sage martial artists around. It was not wise to clash with He Jiming. 5 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. "Can we go now?" Zhang Chang stared at He Jiming and said coldly, "It has already been 40 minutes since the Human Demon left. If we were a step late, the Human Demon would have recovered. At that time, it would be harder for us to kill the Human Demon than to ascend to heaven. Let's go." He Jiming wanted to stay a little longer, but after hearing Zhang Chang's cold words, he immediately decided to leave. Buzz! There was a slight tremor in the void. He Jiming, Zhang Chang, and the others rushed towards Emperor City at a terrifying speed. 5 minutes after He Jiming and Zhang Chang left, when Di Tianming and Di Xiao entered the Emperor Divine Palace, Human Devil and Ning Yu heaved a sigh of relief. Then Human Demon and Ning Yu began to use their perception to probe the Palace Protection Formation. Even though He Jiming and Zhang Chang, the 2 most terrifying people, had left, there was still the Palace Protection Formation in front of Ning Yu and Human Demon. If he wanted to sneak into the Emperor Palace, he would have to break the Palace Protection Formation without anyone noticing. Chapter 1729. Chapter 1729, Annette. However, how difficult was it to break through the palace protecting formation without anyone noticing? Even if the Human Demon recovered to peak Sage Realm, it would still be difficult, much less late-stage Sage Realm. This was because the palace protecting formation had been brought by He Jiming from a high-level realm. Relatively speaking, it was difficult for low-level realms to compete with high-level realms in the field of teleportation formations. While the Human Demon was staring at the palace protecting formation, Ning Yu was also staring at it. Undeniably, the palace protection formation of Emperor Palace was too perfect. In Ning Yu's opinion, even if Grandmaster Zhao came personally, he wouldn't be able to break through the formation. As for the Human Demon, Ning Yu didn't believe that he was much stronger than Grandmaster Zhao. The only thing the Human Demon had that was stronger than Grandmaster Zhao was his cultivation. After devouring a drop of Qilin blood, the Human Demon's cultivation had recovered to late-stage Sage Realm. Late-stage Sage Realm was already at the peak of the immortal Spirit Realm. However, the cultivation of a late-stage Human Demon Saint was useless against the protective formation of the palace of the Emperor Divine Palace. Screw it! The Human Demon knew that if this dragged on and his aura started to drop, the consequences would be unimaginable. Rather than waiting for death, he might as well give it a try. If he succeeded, he could seize control of the palace. If he failed, he could just think of a way to escape. Hold on, there must be a way. Let me think. Ning Yu called out to the Human Demon. At the same time, he was trying to think of a solution. Ning Yu knew very well that if the Human Demon rushed out now, he wouldn't be able to break through the formation, even if he used brute force. There was only one chance, and Ning Yu didn't want to waste it. What should I do? Ning Yu clenched his fists. The helplessness in the depths of his heart made him indifferent. "I got it." Suddenly, Ning Yu smacked his head and said hurriedly, "Senior human demon, how's your disguise technique?" Disguise technique? Hearing Ning Yu's baffling words, the human demon was taken aback at first, but he quickly came to a realization. Meanwhile, at the main entrance of the Emperor Divine Palace, two martial artists were whispering. "Do you think Uncle Chang will be able to stop the massacre of the human demons?" Under Di Tianming's treatment, Zhang Kejuan had already recovered. At this moment, Zhang Kejuan was rubbing his hands together with a worried look on his face. Zhang Kejuan was the main person in charge of this trip to Emperor God Palace. It didn't matter if he failed the mission. After all, he was a prospective war god of the Zhang family. Not many people would criticize him. However, if 4 or 5 of the Zhang clan sages died, he would be held responsible. At that time, not only would the title of quasi-war god be taken away, but his life would also be in danger. One had to know that he wasn't the only war god of the Zhang family in the demon spirit realm. With this layer of relationship, the worry on Zhang Kejuan's face was not an act, but a genuine worry. If Zhang Chang is alone, it might be a little difficult. Di Tianming frowned slightly. Then he changed the topic and said, "However, with He Jiming bringing 4 or 5 warriors of the initial stage of the Sage Realm to help, this matter is definitely in the bag." "I hope so." Although Di Tianming had said this, Zhang Kejuan was still very worried. For Zhang Kejuan, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was in a life-or-death situation. Whoosh! About a minute later, just as Zhang Kejuan and Di Tianming were about to leave, the void outside Emperor God Palace trembled. Then 2 warriors appeared. "Someone is back." The change in the void caused Zhang Kejuan and Di Tianming's expressions to change drastically. They hurriedly opened the main gate of Emperor God Palace and flew out. Creak! As soon as Zhang Kejuan and Di Tianming came out, Di Shao followed them with a dozen sages. After all, this was Emperor God Palace. Di Shao was the palace master of Emperor God Palace. Now that someone had appeared, he naturally had to show up immediately. A high-level plane is indeed terrifying. Di Shao was seriously injured, but he recovered in such a short time. Seeing Di Zhao's lively appearance, Ning Yu couldn't help but smack his lips. This trip to Emperor God Palace allowed Ning Yu to see how terrifying a high-level plane was. A dozen sages, the palace protecting formation, and a recovered Di Shao. No matter which one it was enough for Ning Yu to pay attention to it. The sect behind He Jiming is not simple. Moreover, Di Shao only has a superficial wound that can be healed with a few elixirs. The sect behind He Jiming wouldn't stop Di Shao on this. Perhaps sensing Ning Yu's shock, Human Demon sent a voice transmission. Act more realistically later. Don't let the cat out of the bag. Don't worry, I'll handle it. Speaking of business, Ning Yu's expression was still rather solemn. The aura of a late-stage human demon, Saint could last for another 10 minutes. After that, it would immediately drop to the freezing point. Within 10 minutes, they had to control all the warriors in Emperor God Palace and the palace protecting formation. The task was rather difficult, and Ning Yu couldn't afford to be careless. "Uncle Chang!" "Elder." Seeing Ning Yu and Human Demon, Zhang Kejuan and Di Shao said almost at the same time. Among them, Zhang Kejuan's face was rather pale or even bloodless. In Zhang Kejuan's opinion, Zhang Chang's return so soon meant that the Zhang family sages in Emperor City were most likely dead. Thinking that all the Zhang family sages had died in Emperor City, Zhang Kejuan had the urge to vomit blood. Relatively speaking, Di Zhao's expression was much better. Among all the sages who descended from the high-level planes, only He Jiming thought highly of Di Shao and protected him. Although He Jiming had told the rest of the sages to follow Di Zhao's orders before he left for Divine City, they had to listen to Di Zhao. But Di Zhao's strength was too weak to suppress so many sages. Everyone seemed to obey Di Zhao on the surface, but in fact they were very dissatisfied with Di Zhao. Now that He Jiming had returned, Di Zhao was naturally very happy. Di Zhao didn't care whether He Jiming had killed Human Demon or not. Right now, all he wanted to do was to stabilize his position and go to the high-level plains as soon as possible. Because Di Zhao and Zhang Kejuan each had their own ulterior motives, they didn't notice anything wrong with Zhang Chang and He Jiming. Boom! Di Zhao even personally ordered the two sages to open the palace protection formation and let Ningyu and Human Demon in. Whoosh! Whoosh! Human Demon and Ningyu didn't argue. They flew side by side, and in the blink of an eye, they entered Emperor Palace and headed for the largest hall of Emperor Palace. Seeing Zhang Chang and He Jiming come in, Di Zhao and Zhang Kejuan didn't dare to delay and hurried to catch up. Zhang Kejuan wanted to ask about the Zhang family sages, and Di Zhao wanted to enter the high-level plains earlier. Therefore, Ningyu and Human Demon definitely wouldn't be discovered at this stage. As for how long? Chapter 1730. Waiting for you to come in. Before long, Ningyu and Human Demon arrived in front of the largest palace in Emperor Divinity Palace. Standing in front of the palace gate, He Jiming waved his hand and said in a clear voice, "What are you all doing here? Go to the palace's defensive formation and guard it. Don't let that traitor Sun Deshan and Human Devil take advantage of the situation." Yes. As the Human Demon spoke, he quietly released his mid-stage sage aura. Under the deterrence of the Human Demon, the surrounding sages were very obedient and obediently retreated to the side of the palace protecting formation. Seeing the saints leave, the demon nodded in satisfaction. He then looked at Di Zhao and said, "Come with me." Di Zhao was overjoyed when he saw He Jiming had asked him to stay behind. He quickly followed the Human Devil into the palace. Looking at the Human Devil and Emperor Shao entering the palace, Ningyu knew that it was done. As long as the Human Devil was given half a minute, he would be able to control Di Zhao. According to the plan that Ningyu and the Human Demon had discussed before, the Human Demon would first control Di Zhao, then Di Tianming, and Zhang Kejuan. Therefore, Ningyu's current task was to stall Zhang Kejuan and Di Tianming so that they wouldn't get suspicious. Uncle Chang, the saint of the Zhang family of Emperor City, after the Di Zhao and the Human Demon left, Zhang Kejuan could no longer suppress the worry in his heart and hurriedly asked, "Don't worry, they have activated the city protection formation and are now using it to fight against the human demons." Ningyu interrupted Zhang Kejuan's words and said indifferently. After saying this, Ningyu looked at Zhang Kejuan, wanted to say something, but hesitated. He thought for a moment and continued, "He Jiming left 4 or 5 sages to help, so you don't have to worry about Emperor City." Hearing this, Zhang Kejuan revealed a relieved expression. As long as the Zhang family saint was fine, Zhang Kejuan did not want to care about anything else. "You can come in." At this time, Di Zhao's voice came from the main hall. Although Di Zhao had called them in, Zhang Kejuan and Di Tianming still rushed into the main hall without stopping. After all, this was Emperor Divine Palace, and Di Zhao was the palace master of Emperor Divine Palace on the surface. Otherwise, the plan to negotiate with Emperor God Palace would be ruined. Boom! However, as soon as Zhang Kejuan and Di Tianming entered the hall, something shocking happened. Di Zhao turned into a blur and charged at Zhang Kejuan at an extremely terrifying speed. Di Tianming's expression changed slightly at Di Zhao's sudden attack. Zhang Kejuan was a half-step saint, while Di Zhao was a saint. Since Di Zhao had attacked Zhang Kejuan so blatantly, Zhang Kejuan definitely had no way to resist. Di Tianming stared at the calm and composed Zhang Chang. The idea of intervening was thrown to the back of his mind. Even Zhang Chang, a martial artist at the middle stage of the sage realm, did not make a move. How could it be his turn to show up? Furthermore, Di Tianming thought that Di Xiao and Zhang Kejuan were just sparring, and it was not convenient for him to intervene. Di Tianming was not the only one who thought that Di Xiao wanted to spar with Zhang Kejuan. Even Zhang Kejuan himself thought so. Therefore, Zhang Kejuan did not use his trump card. Instead, he used his physical strength to fight against Di Xiao. Crack! But soon, Zhang Kejuan realized that he was wrong. The power of Di Xiao's punch was extremely powerful. With a single punch, Zhang Kejuan's fist was directly broken. The breaking of his fist made Zhang Kejuan's expression change drastically. He hurriedly wanted to use his trump card. Puff! But how could Di Xiao give Zhang Kejuan the chance to use his trump card? He did not let Zhang Kejuan off. He rushed forward and punched again. This punch landed on Zhang Kejuan's face. The huge force made Zhang Kejuan spit out a few mouthfuls of blood. What did you do to me? Wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, Zhang Kejuan roared crazily at Di Xiao. Zhang Kejuan naturally did not care about the physical pain. After all, he was a half-step saint and Di Xiao was a saint. But when Di Xiao's fist came into contact with his cheek, a cold light quietly entered his body. It was this cold light that almost drove Zhang Kejuan crazy, because Zhang Kejuan could clearly feel that his life was in someone else's hands. This feeling of his life being controlled by someone else made Zhang Kejuan very uncomfortable. But people under eaves had to bow their heads. If Zhang Kejuan wanted Di Xiao to retract the cold light in his body, he had to change his tone. So Zhang Kejuan took a deep breath and changed his tone. Palace Master Di Xiao, I came here to cooperate with you. I hope you won't make this kind of joke again. Do you think he's joking with you? Human Demon took a step forward and said, If you know what's good for you, shut up as soon as possible. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. While speaking, Human Demon's mind moved and directly triggered the cold light in Zhang Kejuan's body. When the cold light was triggered, Zhang Kejuan let out a hysterical scream. Zhang Kejuan's scream was extremely miserable. If Ning Yu hadn't been mentally prepared, he would have probably looked at Zhang Kejuan in a different light. Human Demon had said before that he would use an iron fist to control Di Xiao and Zhang Kejuan. He also said that Zhang Kejuan and Di Xiao were key figures. Once he controlled them, his plan would be halfway to success. Are you going to come over obediently and let me control you, or should I just kill you? After dealing with Zhang Kejuan, Human Demon looked at Di Tianming with interest. I've locked down the hall. You only have 2 choices now. Surrender or die. Di Tianming's expression was gloomy. To be honest, he was 100 times unwilling to surrender to He Jiming. First of all, He Jiming's cultivation was only 1 level higher than his. No matter what, Di Tianming was still a peak early-stage sage. Di Tianming's gaze shifted to Ningyu, who was also Zhang Chang in his heart. But at this time, Zhang Chang's expression was indifferent, as if he had already reached some kind of agreement with He Jiming. Di Tianming was in a trance. He didn't know what He Jiming had offered to move Zhang Chang. Could He Jiming have promised to let Zhang Chang reach late-stage sage? Di Tianming didn't dare to think about it. He didn't want to. Sigh. Suddenly Ningyu sighed. Let's compromise. As soon as Ningyu's voice fell, Human Demon cooperated and released his late-stage sage aura. What? As expected, the moment Human Demon released his late-stage sage aura, Di Tianming's expression changed. He was stunned. Late-stage sage? When did He Jiming reach late-stage sage? No wonder Zhang Chang was on He Jiming's side. He Jiming had long since reached late-stage sage. Everything seemed to make sense now. Shua. Human Demon didn't care whether Di Tianming was in a trance or not. He grasped this rare opportunity and flew to Di Tianming's side. Not good. Seeing He Jiming suddenly appear in front of him, Di Tianming's expression changed. He hurriedly tried to block. Bang! However, it was already too late for Di Tianming to resist. Chapter 1731. Chapter 1731. Chapter 1731. Mission Rumble. The human demon's fist had not only struck Di Tianming's head, but also his hope of escaping. The booming sound in his head made Di Tianming feel extremely dizzy. However, Di Tianming didn't have the time to pay attention to whether the human demon would make a second move. His focus was on his mind. Not only had the human demon's punch landed on his head, but it had also sent a ray of cold light into his brain. It was this cold glint that caused Di Tianming's heart to sink. Di Tianming could clearly sense that He Jiming could kill him on the spot with a single thought. He Jiming, I have no enmity with you. Why are you doing this to me? Di Tianming gritted his teeth and glared at the human demon, his face filled with indignation. To be honest, Di Tianming really couldn't understand. He was only at the peak of the early stage of the sage realm. Why did He Jiming want to control him? If it was said that He Jiming valued his strength and wanted to take him in as a follower, he would definitely not believe it. He Jiming was someone from a higher plane, and he was only at the peak of the early stage of the sage realm. He Jiming did not need to spend so much effort to control him. But after thinking about it, Di Tianming didn't know what He Jiming was thinking. Why? The corner of the human demon's mouth curled up as he stared at Di Tianming. However, as he stared at Di Tianming, his appearance gradually changed. Human demon. When Di Tianming saw the human demon's original appearance, he was so shocked that he couldn't speak. In the end, He Jiming wasn't He Jiming, but a human demon in disguise. No wonder he would attack him. Something's wrong. Suddenly, Di Tianming shifted his gaze to Ningyu. Since human demon pretended to be He Jiming, then Zhongchang must be Ningyu. Buzz. Although Di Tianming had guessed this result, he still slumped to the ground when Ningyu revealed his true appearance. He had really led the wolf into the house this time. Di Shao, go to the Great Palace Protecting Formation and bring 5 sages here. Ignoring Di Tianming, human demon turned to Di Shao and said, Remember, don't alert the enemy. Yes. Di Shao didn't dare to tarry and left the hall. Di Shao left quickly and returned just as quickly. A minute later, Di Shao brought the 5 saints back to the main hall. For me, 1 for you. The human demon first sent a voice transmission to Di Tianming. Then he rushed forward and faced the 4 of them alone. Although Di Tianming was extremely unwilling, he didn't dare to behave atrociously in front of the human demon. What's more, the human demon only controlled him, not restricted his combat power. Right now, he was still at the peak of the early saint realm. It was a piece of cake for him to deal with an early-stage sage realm warrior. Rumble. The battle did not last long. Even though the human demon was fighting 1 against 4, he still had the absolute advantage. In just a minute, the human demon had subdued the 4 early-stage sage realm warriors. A minute and a half later, Di Tianming defeated another sage. Xiu. Although Di Tianming had taken control of the other saint, the human demon was still worried. He flicked his finger and a cold light shot out, entering the mind of the saint controlled by Di Tianming. 1 minute and 40 seconds had passed. In this 1 minute and 40 seconds, all 5 saints were under the human demon's control. Their lives were in the human demon's hands. Di Shao, you are the palace lord of Emperor Palace. You should know the Emperor Palace very well. The human demon did not waste any time. After all, he didn't have much time left. so he went straight to the point. You and Di Tianming take 2 early-stage Sage Realm warriors and control all the Emperor Palace Late Sky Supreme warriors and above. Di Xiao's heart skipped a beat when he heard the human demon's words. Di Xiao was no fool. He knew what the human demon meant by control. If that was the case, then the entire Emperor Palace would have a new owner. Di Xiao's face darkened. He was the Palace Lord of Emperor Palace. If the Emperor Palace changed owners so easily, how could he face the ancestors of Emperor Palace? How could he face the founding ancestors of Emperor Palace? How could Di Xiao's plan be hidden from the human demon? The human demon had never been merciful to those who did not listen to his orders. Moreover, Di Xiao had attacked him and Ningyu while they were resting. The human demon did not forget this grudge. Uft, uft. Without another word, the human demon triggered the cold light in Di Xiao's body, causing him to spit out several mouthfuls of blood. Di Xiao spat out several mouthfuls of blood, and his face turned extremely pale. Last chance. The human demon extended his index finger. I don't want to say it twice. Swish, swish, swish. Seeing that the human demon was enraged, Di Tianming and the other 2 initial Sage Realm cultivators immediately rushed out of the hall. Di Tianming and the other 2 sages were no fools. If they didn't do as Ningyu said, they would end up like Di Xiao. Swish! Di Xiao glared at the human demon, then flew out of the hall with a face full of unwillingness. The human demon did not care about Di Xiao's murderous glare. If Di Xiao wasn't useful to him, he would have killed him long ago. Why would he wait until now? The 3 of you have a simple task. The human demon looked at the 3 shivering sages in the hall. There's still some distance from here to the main entrance of the Emperor Palace. I don't want to see anyone in the middle. Understood. The 3 sages thought the human demon would issue an order, but it turned out that it was just an insignificant one. All Late Sky Supreme and above cultivators were under the control of Di Xiao and Di Tianming. It would be a waste for the 3 sages to stop anyone below that level. Senior human demon, how long will it take for you to recover from the backlash of the Qilin bled? After the last 3 sages left, Ningyu looked at the human demon and asked. As for Zhang Kejuan, Ningyu had no time to worry about him. What Ningyu cared about was how long it would take for the human demon to recover from the backlash of the Qilin blood. After all, it had been half an hour since He Jiming and Zhang Chang left. It wouldn't be long before He Jiming and Zhang Chang returned. What would they do when that happened? About an hour. How could the human demon not know what Ningyu was worried about? But the human demon was helpless. This was the immortal spirit region, and there weren't many elixirs for him to recover. An hour of recovery time was his most conservative estimate. Under normal circumstances, he would need 2 to 3 hours to recover. How about this? Let's go to the Emperor Palace's treasury and see if we can find anything useful. Chapter 1732. The dungeon, that's right. Why didn't I think of that? Hearing Ningyu's words, human demon was suddenly enlightened, revealing a look of excitement. As one of the top sects in the Sky Demon region, Emperor Palace definitely had a lot of treasures. However, human demon was not particularly interested in the heavenly treasures of the Emperor Divine Palace. What human demon cared about was whether He Jiming had left anything behind. He Jiming was someone from a higher plane, so the things he brought with him would definitely be more precious than the treasures in Emperor Palace. Swish, swish. Human demon and Ning, you weren't theoretical but practical. The 2 of them immediately chased after Di Xiao. Di Xiao was the palace lord of Emperor Palace, so he definitely knew what treasures were in the palace. Therefore, finding Di Xiao was the wisest decision. What's wrong? Di Xiao tensed up when he saw the travel-worn Ningyu and human demon. His life was in the hands of the human demon. At this time, he didn't dare to show any dissatisfaction to the human demon. "Take out all the precious herbs you have in the Emperor Divine Palace." Ning Yu went straight to the point. This, Di Shao hesitated. To be honest, he didn't want to take out the precious herbs in Emperor Palace. But when he remembered that his life was in human demon's hands, he immediately said, "There are indeed many precious herbs in Emperor Palace." The Emperor Divine Palace does have a lot of precious medicinal herbs, but they may not be very attractive to warriors of the Saint Realm. If you need them, I can take you to the dungeon to meet someone. He has a very precious medicinal herb. Ning Yu frowned slightly, but didn't say anything. Di Shao didn't care whether Ning Yu said anything or not. In his opinion, human demon's attitude was what he was concerned about. "What herb?" Human demon asked. "Ascension grass," Di Shao answered. "What the F***CK?" Human demon swore on the spot, a look of horror on his face. The reason why human demon had such an expression was because the ascension grass was too precious, so precious that it was rare even in a higher plane. In a higher plane, the ascension grass was only in the hands of a few big sects or families. While shocked, the human demon was also very curious. Since the Emperor Divine Palace had caught the martial artist who possessed the ascension grass and imprisoned him in the dungeon, why was the ascension grass still with that martial artist? One had to know that a stalk of ascension immortal grass had the chance to create a martial artist that surpassed the sage level. "Take me there." The human demon took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. Human demon knew very well that he couldn't afford to panic at this point. After all, there was not much time left for him. He must find a way to overcome the backlash brought by the Qilin's blood before He Jiming and Zhang Chang came back. Whoosh! After that, Di Shao led the way, while Ning Yu and the human devil followed closely behind. As for Di Tianming and the other two sages, they went to control the higher-ups of Emperor God Palace obediently and did not dare to slack off. Creak! Following Di Shao, Ning Yu and the human devil turned left and right, and finally, a minute later, they arrived at the entrance of the dungeon. Di Shao took out a golden key from his pocket and inserted it into the hole on the stone door. The thick and heavy stone door slowly opened. Originally, Di Shao wanted to let the human devil and Ning Yu enter first, but when he saw the cold expression on the human devil's face, he immediately moved and entered the dungeon first. Di Shao was a shrewd man. Although he was the palace master of Emperor God Palace, he did not want to enter the dungeon. In other words, no one from Emperor God Palace wanted to enter the dungeon. To be honest, if it wasn't for the fact that the human devil wanted to plunder the Emperor God Palace's treasury, Di Shao would not have entered the dungeon like a fool. Because the last time he entered the dungeon, Di Xiao's scalp was still tingling with numbness. Clatter! Not long after Ning Yu and the others entered the dungeon, they heard clattering sounds. Vampire bats! Di Xiao's face was full of fear, and his eyes flickered. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "Senior human demon, these vampire bats are all under the control of the Ascension Grass's owner. If we dare to take even half a step forward, they will attack us." Not only was Di Shao terrified, but his scalp was also numb. Not long ago, Di Shao had boasted that he had reached the half-step Saint Realm, so he had rashly entered the dungeon after coming out of the training ground. At that time, if he hadn't run fast enough, he would have become food for the vampire bats. Therefore, Di Shao still felt a little traumatized when he faced the vampire bats again. What's the cultivation of the Ascension Grass's owner? The human devil stopped and did not continue forward. Instead, he stared at Di Shao and said doubtfully, "These vampire bats are not weak. Although most of them are at the peak of the Sky Supreme Realm, there are a few that have reached the half-step Saint Realm. They should be mid-stage Saint Realm, or even late-stage Saint Realm." Di Shao suddenly felt a little embarrassed when he mentioned the cultivation of the Ascension Grass's owner. In fact, The reason why the Ascension Grass's owner was imprisoned in the dungeon was because of the founder of Emperor God Palace. It was said that after the founder founded Emperor God Palace, he personally built the dungeon to imprison the Ascension Grass's owner in it. Go in. The human devil pouted and said faintly. Di Shao felt like crying when he heard the human devil tell him to go deeper into the dungeon. If he went deeper into the dungeon now, he would definitely face the vampire bats. But he reaped what he sowed. Di Shao was the one who had caused all of this. Helpless, Di Shao could only bite the bullet and go deeper. Whoosh! As soon as Di Shao took a few steps forward, a few vampire bats rushed towards him. Kill! Seeing so many vampire bats flying towards him, Di Xiao's anger flared up. The last time he came here, he was only a half-step Saint Realm expert. This time he was an early-stage Saint Realm expert. You bullied me when I was a half-step Saint Realm expert. Now that you're an early-stage Saint Realm expert, you still dare to bully me? This was intolerable. Rumble. Di Shao didn't care about the consequences and directly launched a powerful attack. Whoosh! Under Di Xiao's powerful attack, hordes of vampire bats fell and died on the spot. That's all. Seeing so many vampire bats die in front of him, Di Shao smirked and said coldly, If I knew you were so weak, I wouldn't have waited until now. Is that so? It seems like you really want the Ascension Grass. At this moment, a faint voice sounded. Yes, I really want the Ascension Grass. No. Di Shao nodded and said proudly. However, Di Xiao's words came to an abrupt halt. His eyes stared at the depths of the dungeon and said in fear, Who are you? Chapter 1733. Chapter 1733. Chapter 1733. Immortal Ascension. Grass Thump. The words that entered his ears caused Di Shao to stagger and almost fall to the ground. Kill Di Shao and the human devil? What a joke! Right now, Di Xiao's life was still in the hands of the human devil. If the human devil wanted him dead by midnight, he wouldn't be able to live past midnight. Under this premise, Di Shao naturally would not foolishly make an enemy of the human devil. Humph! Who do you think you are? How dare you order me? Thinking of this, Di Shao immediately snorted coldly at the depths of the dungeon. This is Emperor Palace, and I am the Palace Master of Emperor Palace. If you know what's good for you, hand over the ascending immortal grass as soon as possible. Otherwise, I will kill you. While speaking, Di Shao quietly took a few steps back, getting closer to the human devil. Although Di Shao looked arrogant on the surface, he was actually very nervous. At this time, Di Xiao's heart was a mess, and he was extremely worried. What if the owner of the ascending immortal grass was really angry? Would the human demon stand up for him? Good, very good. You really are arrogant. The owner of the ascending immortal grass wasn't angered by Di Xiao's words. He only left behind a few words before disappearing without a trace. Voila! Not only that, the flock of vampire bats also retreated in unison, disappearing into the depths of the underground prison. Whew! Di Shao couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when he saw the vampire bats disappear. The worry in his heart lessened a little. No matter what, since the owner of the immortal ascension grass was willing to withdraw so many vampire bats, it meant that he was still very afraid of the human demon. As long as the owner of the immortal ascension grass was afraid of the human devil, then this trip to the dungeon would not be particularly dangerous. Lead the way. The human demon gazed into the depths of the dungeon, then turned to Di Shao and said, I want to see who the owner of the ascending immortal grass is. To be honest, the human demon had chosen to come to the dungeon to obtain the immortal ascension grass. Even if the human demons wanted to obtain the immortal ascension grass, they would choose to obtain it through legitimate means, such as exchanging immortal crystals or Qilin fruits. But now, the human demon had changed his mind. After all, if it wasn't for the fact that he was powerful, he would have become food in the stomach of the owner of the ascending immortal grass. Survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest. Sometimes you don't want to kill someone, but they'll send their neck and head right in front of you. In this kind of situation, if he still didn't kill him, it would seem a little unreasonable. Sha. Perhaps it was because of the human devil's influence, but Di Zhao's courage suddenly grew. Next, Di Zhao led the way and lit up the passage to the dungeon. After the passage to the dungeon lit up, Ningyu and the human demon Fong realized that there was another world here. There are actually so many formations. As he walked, Ningyu's gaze moved around. The passage to the dungeon was not particularly spacious. In fact, it was a little narrow, so narrow that it could only accommodate 2 people at the same time. It didn't matter if it was narrow. The most important thing was that, from time to time, a formation would appear on the walls on both sides of the passage. At first, the density of the array formations was relatively small. However, as they continued to go deeper, the density of the array formations increased. There are even many array formations above and below them. Ever since the dungeon was built, these formations have only been opened 3 times. As if seeing the doubt in Ningyu's eyes, Di Zhao explained, "I don't know the reason for the first 2 times, but the 3rd time it was because of the owner of the ascending immortal grass." Oh, hearing this, Ningyu and the human devil raised their eyebrows and looked at Di Zhao in confusion. Being stared at by Ningyu and the human devil, Di Zhao didn't feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, he continued, "In the past, the owner of the ascending immortal grass wasn't the only person imprisoned in the dungeon. There were at least a few hundred people. A few decades ago, the few hundred warriors imprisoned in the dungeon were all devoured by the owner of the ascending immortal grass in one night. At that time, the owner of the ascending immortal grass only had one goal, which was to use the energy of so many people to break out of the dungeon. However, the owner of the ascending immortal grass clearly underestimated the power of the formations. At that time, all the formations in the dungeon were activated, and the owner of the ascending immortal grass was heavily injured. Since then, the owner of the ascending immortal grass became obedient. Who would have thought that when we came in this time, he would have evil thoughts again?" Hearing Di Zhao's explanation, Ningyu and the human devil looked at each other and saw the seriousness in each other's eyes. The owner of the ascending immortal grass was treating them like fools. He wanted to devour them and use the energy in their bodies to break the formations. The human devil was now at the late stage of the Sage Realm, while Di Zhao was at the early stage of the Sage Realm. Once they were controlled by the owner of the ascending immortal grass, there was a real possibility that they could break the formations. "We're here." At that moment, Di Zhao suddenly stopped in his tracks and pointed to an empty area in front of him. The owner of the ascending immortal grass should be in there. Swoosh! Ningyu and the human devil looked in the direction of Di Zhao's palm. Not far in front of them, there was a slightly empty area. The area wasn't particularly large. Under normal circumstances, it should be the size of a prison cell. This dungeon seems a little small. Ningyu looked around and felt that something was wrong. The Emperor Palace was one of the top forces. Moreover, Di Zhao had just said that there were originally hundreds of warriors locked in the dungeon. However, along the way, Ningyu didn't find any room for warriors. The entire dungeon gave Ningyu the impression that it was a straight passageway. It was not particularly long, and at the end of the passageway there was a narrow area. This was the dungeon of the Emperor Palace? If this was really the dungeon of the Emperor God Palace, it didn't make sense. Don't be fooled by the illusion in front of you. Before Di Zhao could explain, the human devil said in a deep voice, "The dungeon is indeed very large. However, the dungeon should be under the control of the owner of the ascending immortal grass." Ha ha ha! Right at that moment, a loud laughter was heard. Then, the space split open and a white-haired old man appeared in front of Ningyu and the others. "Not simple. I originally thought that you were just an ordinary late-stage saint warrior. Now it seems that I was wrong. Very wrong. The white-haired old man stared at the human devil and said, "If I'm not wrong, you come from a high-level plane. Your real cultivation should be beyond a saint. It's just that you're injured. At first, I wanted to devour you and use the energy in your bodies to leave the dungeon. Now I've changed my mind. How about we make a deal?" As soon as he finished speaking, the white-haired old man stared straight at the human devil, as if he was eager to know what the human devil was thinking. When the white-haired old man stared at the human devil stared back. "Let's go." Feeling the aura from the white-haired old man, the human devil's face turned pale. In a few minutes, the human devil's cultivation would drop to the freezing point. Moreover, the white-haired old man was a late-stage saint. He was extremely shrewd and would definitely not be able to get the ascending immortal grass in a short time. The human devil knew the consequences of not getting the ascending immortal grass. Therefore, he decided not to stay and turned to leave. Seeing the human devil turn to leave, the white-haired old man's expression changed. Thinking of his current situation, the white-haired old man gritted his teeth and said, "Bring me out of the dungeon, and I'll give you the ascending immortal grass." Chapter 1734. Zhang Chang. Whoosh! The moment the white-haired elder took out the immortal ascension grass, the human demon stopped. Even though the human demon did not turn around, he could still feel the aura of the immortal ascension grass. "As long as you bring me out of this prison, this immortal ascension grass is all yours." Seeing the human demon stop, the white-haired elder's worry lessened a little. Since he had devoured hundreds of martial artists in the prison, the white-haired elder had quite a lot of things on him. In other words, the white-haired elder was not afraid of the human demon asking for an exorbitant price. He was afraid that the human demon would not negotiate with him. In the white-haired elder's opinion, the human demon only wanted magical treasures and pills. Naturally, the white-haired elder would not be stingy with things like magical treasures and pills. "It's not impossible for me to bring you out." The human demon looked back at the white-haired elder with a slight frown. "The condition is that you give me the immortal ascension grass first. Once I refine it, I will naturally bring you out of this prison. Do you think I'm a fool?" Hearing the human demon's words, the white-haired elder went berserk. Giving him the immortal ascension grass first? Isn't that nonsense? The white-haired elder was certain that if he handed over the immortal ascension grass, the human demon would definitely turn around and leave. The white-haired elder would definitely not agree to such a stupid thing. "If you insist on being a fool, I won't object." The human demon shrugged and stared at the immortal ascension grass in the white-haired elder's hand. "I'll say it one last time. Once I refine the immortal ascension grass, I will naturally bring you out of this prison. Forget it." The white-haired elder was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. The reason why the white-haired elder did not refine the immortal ascension grass after being trapped in the prison for so long was because he wanted to save it for a crucial moment. One had to know that a stalk of immortal ascension grass had the chance to create an existence that surpassed the sages. How could the white-haired elder give such a precious herb to the human demon? Even when the white-haired elder said that he would give the immortal ascension grass to the human demon after he left, it was still a lie. A herb like the immortal ascension grass was rare even in a higher plane. The white-haired elder would definitely keep it for himself. Whoosh! As soon as the white-haired old man uttered the word "no more talk," the human demon seemed to have predicted the white-haired old man's reaction. Grabbing Di Shao in one hand and Ningyu in the other, he dashed out of the dungeon at a terrifying speed. "Don't go. We still have things to talk about." The white-haired old man's expression changed when he saw the human demon leaving. At this moment, the white-haired old man even felt a little regretful. If the human demon really left, what should he do? Was he going to be trapped in the dungeon for the rest of his life? After all, only a late-stage saint would have the ability to take him out of the dungeon. Otherwise, over the years, many experts from the Emperor Divine Palace had entered the dungeon. He would have left long ago. Why would he wait until now? In the white-haired old man's heart, today was the last day he had hoped to leave since he had been imprisoned in the dungeon. Originally, the white-haired old man thought that he had the human devil in his grasp. But now it seemed that he was too naive. The human demon obviously didn't fall for his trick and turned around to leave. The white-haired old man panicked at the human demon's actions. I can give you half of the immortal ascension grass first. I'll give you the other half after you take me away from here. Whoosh! What a pity. Even though the white-haired old man's voice was loud and urgent, he couldn't stop the human demon. In the blink of an eye, the human demon brought Ningyu and Di Xiao to the entrance of the dungeon. Creak! Di Xiao let out a long sigh as he watched the dungeon door slowly close. To be honest, he had been very nervous when facing the white-haired old man in the dungeon. After all, the white-haired old man was a late-stage saint. If the human demon and the white-haired old man fought in the dungeon, he would be the one to suffer. I'll leave the palace guarding formation to you. Try your best to buy me an hour of time. The human demon's expression was extremely solemn. He looked at Ningyu and said, Also, lend me your Qilin fruit and Qilin heart blood. I'll return them to you when we return to the higher realms. No problem. Without any hesitation, Ningyu took out the Qilin fruit and Qilin heart blood and threw them to the human demon. In fact, even without the human demon's words, Ningyu already knew what was going on. It must be the backlash from the Qilin life blood that the human demon had swallowed earlier. Ningyu knew very well that the human demon's current situation wasn't optimistic. If it was just the backlash from swallowing the Qilin life blood, the human demon definitely wouldn't ask for the Qilin fruit and heart blood. But since the human demon had spoken, it meant that the energy seal in his body couldn't be suppressed any longer. Whoosh! Taking the Qilin fruit and heart blood from Ningyu, the human demon's figure gradually turned illusory and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Let's go to the palace guarding formation. After the human demon left, Ningyu didn't linger. Instead, he glanced at Di Xiao and flew toward the palace guarding formation. There were about 10 early-stage Saint Realm cultivators at the palace guarding formation. Before the human demon recovered, how to gain the absolute trust of these 10 saints was a headache for Ningyu. As long as he could gain the trust of these 10 saints, Ningyu could let them control the palace guarding formation. That way, even if He Jiming and Zhang Chang returned, they wouldn't be able to easily break the palace guarding formation. The dungeon wasn't very far from the palace guarding formation. It didn't take long for Ningyu and Di Xiao to stop in front of the palace guarding formation. Whoosh! 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 Because Ningyu was now in Zhang Chang's appearance. Only 3 cultivators flew over when he stopped. Did anyone suspicious appear during this time? Di Xiao's expression was indifferent as he asked in a low voice according to Ningyu's instructions. One of the short-haired saint warriors frowned slightly, as if he felt that Di Xiao's tone was a bit arrogant. But thinking of He Jiming's instructions before he left, the short-haired saint answered, No one suspicious appeared. That's good. Di Xiao nodded and then continued, Elder, he told us to block the palace guarding formation within an hour. No one is allowed to come in. Buzz. Not long after Di Xiao's words fell, the void outside the palace guarding formation trembled, and then a group of 6 or 7 warriors appeared. Ningyu was very familiar with the 2 leading warriors. They were none other than He Jiming and Zhang Chang. Hurry up and open the palace guarding formation. He Jiming's face was gloomy as he shouted at the palace guarding formation. Don't be late, I want you to. However, He Jiming stopped abruptly before he could say the word good. because He Jiming saw Zhang Chang next to Di Shao. To be exact, he saw Zhang Chang, who was played by Ningyu. "Who the hell are you?" He Jiming saw Ningyu, and Zhang Chang naturally saw him clearly. Suddenly seeing his other self, Zhang Chang's whole person became violent. Chapter 1735. Chapter 1735. Chapter 1735. The army's morale shaken. Block the Great Formation. Don't let anyone in. Ningyu's expression did not change in the face of Zhang Chang's question. He said lightly, "If anyone dares to break into the Great Formation." At this point, Ningyu paused for a moment before his cold voice rang out, "Kill without mercy." As Ningyu said these words, the 10 warriors at the early stage of the sage realm around him immediately changed their expressions. The 10 warriors at the early stage of the sage realm were prejudiced. They had long believed that Ningyu was Zhang Chang and human demon was He Jiming. Now, 2 warriors suddenly appeared, one claiming to be Zhang Chang and the other claiming to be He Jiming. How could they not be shocked? Although they were shocked, the 10 warriors at the early stage of the sage realm immediately scattered and looked at He Jiming and Zhang Chang vigilantly. As long as He Jiming and Zhang Chang dared to attack the Great Formation of the palace without permission, they would definitely activate the Great Formation to the extreme and kill them. "I'm so angry. I'm so angry." Seeing Ningyu fanning the Great Formation on the other side, Zhang Chang trembled with anger and his nose became crooked. Not only did he pretend to be himself, but he also gave orders. This was really intolerable. He Jiming and Zhang Chang had the same idea. At this time, He Jiming's face was gloomy and he could not help clenching his fists. However, He Jiming did not lose his mind. He had brought the Great Formation of the Emperor Palace from a high-level world, so he knew it very well. He Jiming was very self-aware. He knew that it was impossible for him to break the Great Formation of the palace with his ability. Even if Zhang Chang and the 4 or 5 warriors at the early stage of the sage realm joined in, they would not be able to break the Great Formation of the palace. If he really angered the fake Zhang Chang inside, he might end up getting himself into trouble. What should I do? Although Zhang Chang looked very angry, he was actually very rational. At such a critical moment, Zhang Chang did not choose to break the Great Formation of the palace with brute force. Instead, he turned to look at He Jiming and said in a deep voice, "You arranged the Great Formation of the palace. I hope you can break it as soon as possible. I'm thinking of a way." He Jiming did not raise his head and said lightly, "Don't rush me." "Don't rush me? Do you think I want to rush you?" Hearing He Jiming's irresponsible words, Zhang Chang became even more furious. Zhang Chang didn't care who controlled the Emperor Palace. He only cared about one thing, and that was Zhang Kejuan's life. Zhang Kejuan was the quasi-war god of the Zhang family in the demonic spirit realm. If he died in the Emperor Divine Palace, it would be the end of his family. Di Shao, what do you think of this matter? He Jiming's eyes flickered as he stared at Di Shao and asked in a deep voice. He Jiming had been paying attention to Di Shao from the corner of his eyes. He Jiming could conclude that Zhang Chang was pretending, but He Jiming knew that Di Shao was definitely real, because Di Shao's few hidden movements almost told him everything that had happened in the Emperor God Palace. However, He Jiming was a very suspicious person. Even though Di Shao had secretly communicated with him, he was still not at ease. In order to verify the authenticity of the news, He Jiming decided to test Di Shao. What do I think? Of course, with my eyes open. Next to Ningyu, Di Shao rolled his eyes and said, "If I'm not wrong, you too should be human demon and Ningyu." I see. This time He Jiming finally understood. Ningyu and human demon didn't leave. Instead, they lurked around. When He Jiming and Zhang Chang went to the Emperor City, they pretended to be them and sneaked into the Emperor Palace. Not only did they sneak into the Emperor Palace, but Ningyu and human demon also controlled most of the warriors in the Emperor Palace. However, there was one thing that made He Jiming very happy. Ningyu and Human Demon didn't have time to control the 10 early-stage Sage Realm Warriors in front of them. In other words, as long as they could handle the 10 early-stage Sage Realm Warriors, they could open the palace guarding formation. As long as the palace guarding formation was opened, He Jiming was 100% sure that he could easily subdue Ningyu. I advise you to get out of here as soon as possible, otherwise. Di Xiao took a step forward, and his cold voice resounded in the area. Palace Master Di, I forgot to remind you that Elder He Jiming just asked you to go to the main hall. Ningyu frowned slightly, and then waved his hand to interrupt Di Xiao's words. I'll keep an eye on this place. You can rest assured. Bad news. As soon as Ningyu opened his mouth, Di Xiao knew that it was bad news. Since Ningyu asked him to leave, he must have found some clues. At this time, Di Xiao even showed a look of fear. The reason why Di Xiao chose to inform He Jiming was that he thought that Ningyu couldn't find out, and he didn't want to be controlled by Human Demon. Now that he was discovered by Ningyu, Di Xiao gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice, Elder He Jiming personally said that we must ensure the safety of the palace guarding formation. We must not let anyone break into the Emperor Palace. Haha, Palace Master Di is really righteous. Ningyu smiled slightly and then said no more. Since Di Xiao was sensible, Ningyu didn't want to completely fall out with him. After all, with Di Xiao around, he could still stabilize the 10 Saint Realm Warriors around. I'm not righteous, my ass. Di Xiao muttered to himself and then said loudly, Everyone, keep your spirits up. Don't lose face for the Emperor Palace. Crack, crack. He Jiming saw Di Xiao's change before and after. He Jiming clenched his fists, and his face gradually became gloomy. He Jiming must find a way to break the palace guarding formation and take back control of the Emperor Palace. He Jiming wouldn't hang on to one thing. Since Di Xiao didn't take the bait, his attention naturally shifted to an early stage Saint Realm Warrior around the corner. This early stage Saint Realm Warrior was called Zhao Cheng. He had a crew cut and was not particularly tall. There was a very obvious scar on his forehead. Zhao Cheng. Taking a deep breath, He Jiming stared at Zhao Cheng and said coldly, 3 years ago in Lin Yuenga, you had a conflict with a middle-stage Saint Realm Warrior. If I hadn't arrived in time, your head would have been split open. But even if I arrived in time, there was still an indelible scar on your forehead. 2 years ago, in the Forest of Ruins, you were chased by a middle-stage Saint Realm Demon Beast. If I hadn't helped you stall that Demon Beast, you would have died. A year ago, you suffered from chi deviation. It was me who protected you and made sure that you were safe. 3 months ago, the sect, boom! He Jiming's words caused Zhao Cheng's eyes to widen. His entire body froze on the spot. Zhao Cheng was very confused. Was this He Jiming in front of him the real He Jiming? Why did he know so much about me? At this moment, Zhao Cheng's heart began to waver. Although He Jiming's words made sense, Zhao Cheng still didn't dare to open the palace guarding formation. There was no other reason. Zhao Cheng didn't dare to take the risk. Chapter 1736. Chapter 1736. Chapter 1736. Crack with all your might. Looks like we won't be able to stall for much longer. He Jiming's actions were completely seen by Ningyu. Originally, Ningyu thought that as long as he controlled the Emperor Shao and used it to threaten the 10 early-stage Saint Realm Warriors, He Jiming would be restricted to death. But now it seemed that He Jiming, this old fox, was indeed not simple. After talking about Zhao Cheng, He Jiming began to talk about the second early-stage sage, Liangxing. If He Jiming's understanding of Zhao Cheng was not thorough enough, then his understanding of Liangxing was simply a little insane. He Jiming even told him the exact time when Liangxing wet the bed when he was young and peeked at the widow next door bathing. Enough! In the end, He Jiming only stopped when Liang Xing flipped out. However, He Jiming was not someone who would give up easily. Since Liang Xing could not say anything, his target immediately shifted to the third martial artist. Hence, in the next half an hour, He Jiming recounted the rise and fall of the remaining 8 warriors. He Jiming's move of removing the firewood from under the cauldron indeed had a great effect. At this moment, at least 4 or 5 of the 10 early-stage sage warriors chose to believe that He Jiming was the real He Jiming. As for the other 4 or 5 early-stage Saint Realm warriors, they chose to remain neutral and not help either side. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Another 10 minutes passed. The 5 early-stage sage martial artists couldn't help but rush out and begin to crack the palace protecting formation from the inside. He's finally here. Ning Yu did not panic at all. Instead, he was calm. The rebellion of 5 early-stage sage realm warriors would not be a big deal. Di Xiao, go stop them. The look in Ning Yu's eyes turned cold and gloomy. He sent a message to Di Xiao through his soul. There are still 20 minutes before the demi-demon fully recovers. No matter what, you have to hold him off for 20 minutes. As long as you can stall for 20 minutes, I can consider letting the human demon remove his control over you. Upon hearing Ning Yu's words, Di Xiao's face turned a little solemn. Ever since he had been controlled by the human devil, Di Xiao had been trying to find a way to get rid of it. Unfortunately, with Di Xiao's current strength, it was impossible for him to break the demon's control over him. Ning Yu's proposal moved Di Xiao a little. You have to swear a heavenly oath. Although he was tempted, Di Xiao would not completely trust Ning Yu. Di Xiao would only feel at ease if Ning Yu made the heavenly oath. I swear to the heavenly Tao that, as long as you hold on for 20 minutes, I will definitely let the human demon remove his control over you and return you your freedom. Ning Yu did not argue with Di Xiao. He directly swore a heavenly Tao oath. Xiao. With Ning Yu's promise, Di Xiao immediately rushed out and floated in the air. He said loudly, "Everyone calm down. We can't just listen to their side of the story." When Elder He Jiming went to Divine Emperor City, he brought 4 or 5 early-stage sage realm warriors with him. Those 4 warriors haven't returned yet. I believe they must know about your origins. Whoosh! Di Xiao's words were flawless. The 5 early-stage sage realm warriors hurriedly withdrew their attacks and looked a little embarrassed. If things were really as Di Xiao said, then they would definitely be in trouble when He Jiming rushed over if they opened the protective formation rashly. Thinking of this, 2 early-stage sage realm warriors looked at Di Xiao with gratitude. Seeing the reaction of the 2 warriors, Di Xiao's mouth could not help but twitch a few times. You are grateful to me now, but when you know the truth, you will definitely scold me and my ancestors. What should we do now? Seeing that Di Xiao had destroyed He Jiming's 4-hour effort with just a few words, Zhang Chang became more and more worried. What else can we do? Let's attack together and attack the protective formation. He Jiming's eyes showed a determined look. Are you kidding me? Zhang Chang directly denied and said coldly, even if we join forces, we won't be able to break the protective formation. Zhang Chang was very self-aware of his own strength. Humph, you are boosting others' morale and diminishing your own power. He Jiming snorted and immediately sent a voice transmission to Zhang Chang. I have already convinced 2 early-stage sage realm warriors inside. At the critical moment, the 2 warriors inside will naturally help. Are they reliable? Zhang Chang was not particularly relieved and asked. Yes. Nodding heavily, He Jiming stomped his feet on the ground and rushed toward the palace protecting formation. Clatter! Seeing He Jiming rush out, the 4 or 5 sage realm warriors behind him also rushed out. Let's go all out. Zhang Chang gritted his teeth and decided to follow He Jiming to do something crazy this time. Zhang Kejuan was in the Emperor Palace. Zhang Chang was very clear that if he wanted to save Zhang Kejuan, he had to break the protective formation. If he could not even break the protective formation, it meant that he could not enter the Emperor Palace. If he could not enter the Emperor Palace, how could he save Zhang Kejuan? Rumble. 2 early-stage Sage Realm Warriors and 4 or 5 early-stage Sage Realm Warriors attacked together. The scene was very spectacular. All kinds of magic arts flew around, and the void was constantly being attacked, making waves of trembling sounds. I must recover as soon as possible. The more terrifying the attacks of He Jiming and the others were, the more worried Ningyu was. Although the human demon had promised that he would recover in an hour, who knew if there would be an accident? Accidents could happen at any time. If the human demon could not recover in the stipulated time, he would be in trouble. Although he was worried, Ningyu was very clear that he had no choice but to wait. Tick. Time passed minute by minute. In the blink of an eye, 15 minutes had passed. There were only 5 minutes left before the 1 hour agreed upon by the human demon. In the past 15 minutes, the one who had the biggest headache was Di Xiao. In order to delay for 15 minutes, Di Xiao had confronted 9 early-stage Sage Realm Warriors at the same time. Fortunately, there is one person who is stupid. Turning his head to look at the flat-top sage next to him, Di Xiao took a deep breath and thought that it was a close call. Di Xiao thought that he could temporarily suppress the pressure of 9 sages, with He Jiming and the law enforcement team of the high-level sections. Last 5 minutes. Di Xiao calmed everyone down while secretly calculating the time agreed upon with Ningyu. Swoosh! However, at this moment there was a sudden change. The flat-top sage, who had not made a move, suddenly made a move. The flat-top sage injected all the essence chi in his body into his right fist and suddenly punched the weakest area of the protective formation. It's over. The flat-top sage's action made Di Xiao's heart sink. He even stood on the spot in a daze. Outside, He Jiming and Zhang Chang attacked the protective formation with all their strength, while inside, the flat-top sage attacked the weak point. Inside and outside. Chapter 1737. Chapter 1737. Chapter 1737. Strange. Crack. It turned out that Emperor Xiao had been too optimistic. In less than 3 minutes, the palace protection formation of the Emperor Palace collapsed in just 1 minute. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. After the palace protection formation collapsed, the furious He Jiming and Zhang Chang, as well as the 4 to 5 sage martialists behind them, rushed out. He Jiming and Zhang Chang's goals were clear. Zhang Chang did not stay there. Instead, he went deep into the Emperor Palace to find Zhang Kejuan. As for He Jiming, he stopped in front of Ningyu. He Jiming stared at Ningyu coldly and said in a deep voice, "You won't be able to escape today. I'll definitely turn you into ashes." Looking at He Jiming's cold eyes, Ningyu took a deep breath and said, "If you want to turn me into ashes, maybe—" Ningyu stopped abruptly halfway through a sentence. Then Ningyu's lips curled up slightly as he said to He Jiming, "I don't have wings, and I don't want to escape." Huh. Ningyu's sudden move made He Jiming feel a little confused. If He Jiming had been unable to do anything to Ningyu because of the palace protection formation earlier, then Ningyu's life was in He Jiming's hands now. How dare he be so arrogant when his life was in someone else's hands? In He Jiming's opinion, this was no longer arrogance. This was clearly stupidity. "You guys go over together and take him down." Although He Jiming looked down on Ningyu, he was still worried about taking the risk to attack Ningyu. His life was his. If he acted rashly and Ningyu had a backup plan, he would definitely be in trouble. Since the palace protection formation had been broken, it was best to let the original 10 sages test Ningyu's strength. "I'll go." When the flat-top sage heard He Jiming's words, he immediately felt that his opportunity had come. He responded and quickly dashed towards Ningyu at a terrifying speed. This time, the flat-top sage was just an insignificant person who had descended from a high-level plane. But small people also had big ambitions. Since he had already left a good impression in He Jiming's heart, the flat-top sage decided to follow up his victory and take down Ningyu in one fell swoop. As long as he could take down Ningyu, He Jiming would definitely regard him as a direct descendant of the direct descendant when they returned to the higher planes. He Jiming's position in the sect was not simple. The big shots behind him were the higher-ups in the sect. Now that he had a good relationship with He Jiming, no matter how he looked at it, he wouldn't lose out. You overestimate yourself. Ningyu had a disdainful look on his face as he watched the flat-top saint charge towards him. I didn't plan to deal with you at first, but you can't blame me since you came knocking on my door. Ha ha ha. The flat-top sage couldn't help but laugh maniacally when he heard Ningyu's words. After laughing maniacally, the flat-top sage sped up again and said sinisterly, I hope you're not so stubborn. Di Shao, you can make your move now. Ningyu didn't have time to bicker with the flat-top sage. His soul force surged, and he sent a voice transmission to Di Shao. He can die, but leave his corpse for me. Although the flat-top sage was despicable, Ningyu didn't wish for his corpse to be destroyed just like that. The corpse of a sage could be used to refine puppets. Ningyu's cultivation was only at the initial Sky Supreme realm, and he would have to face more and more powerhouses in the future. Moreover, the human demon wouldn't always be by his side. Under such circumstances, if he had a dozen sage-level puppets following him, Ningyu wouldn't have to fear even if he encountered another sage martialist. The corner of Di Zhao's mouth couldn't help but twitch when he heard Ningyu's instructions. He and the flat-top sage were both at the initial sage realm. Not only did Ningyu want him to kill the flat-top sage, but he also wanted him to keep the flat-top sage's corpse. How could there be such a good thing in this world? Unless he reached the intermediate sage realm, Ningyu's request was almost impossible to fulfill. I'll try my best. After saying this, Di Shao immediately dashed out. Before the flat-top saint could reach Ningyu's side, he took the initiative to confront the flat-top saint. Rumble. Two early-stage sage experts were fighting. Moreover, it was a life-and-death battle. The scene became chaotic for a while. Damn it! Di Zhao's sudden attack left the flat-top sage dumbfounded. The flat-top sage was confident that he could defeat Di Shao, but with He Jiming around, how would he dare to use his killer move? After cursing inwardly, the flat-top sage turned to look at He Jiming. His meaning was self-evident. The flat-top sage wanted to seek He Jiming's opinion. He Jiming had to give him an answer whether to kill or keep him alive. Let's keep him alive for now. He Jiming's face was ashen and gloomy to the extreme. Di Shao had made such a huge mistake. Normally, he would be sentenced to death. But He Jiming knew very well that Di Shao couldn't die. He had brought more than 10 sages down from the high-level planes with only 2 missions. Bringing Di Shao back to a high-class realm was one of the 2 tasks. If Di Shao was killed now, wouldn't mean that he had failed this mission? Not long after arriving in the celestial spirit realm, failing a mission would have a huge impact. It would be fine if the people behind him could withstand the pressure, but if they couldn't, He Jiming was doomed. Perhaps the sect would send another team down. Understood. The flat-top sage nodded heavily after receiving He Jiming's reply. He felt a little more confident. No matter how one looked at it, it wasn't too difficult to just fight Di Shao without killing him. Damn it, why am I not as smart as the flat-top sage? That's right, I should have done it. Now that the flat-top sage has taken all the benefits, won't we have to eat dirt? Eat dirt? At this rate, we won't even be able to eat dirt. In my opinion, we don't have to eat dirt at all. The flat-top sage's target is Ningyu. Now that he is being held back by Di Shao, doesn't that mean that our chance has come? Rumble. The last martial artist's words made the rest of the martial artists change expressions. Wasn't that right? The flat-top sage's target was Ningyu, but he was stopped by Di Xiao. As long as they could take down Ningyu, He Jiming would definitely be very happy. If He Jiming was happy, they wouldn't have to worry about the flat-top sage's intelligence. Moreover, He Jiming's original words just now were all of you go together and take him down for me. If they attacked now, they wouldn't be scolded by He Jiming. Whoosh! They attacked as soon as they said they would. The remaining 9 early-stage sages, plus the 5 sages that He Jiming had brought, added up to a total of 14 sages. All of them charged towards Ningyu. With so many sages attacking together, it was a spectacular scene. Finally making a move, the 14 sages attacked together. Not only did Ningyu not escape, but his body slowly rose into the air. If one observed closely, one could see that Ningyu's expression was calm, without a trace of nervousness. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.